Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere loud, sweaty, and surprisingly unhygienic, the city of ancient Rome, a place where marble temples gleamed, senators schemed, and the public baths were basically a social media feed you couldn't log out of. Forget the glory of the Colosseum or those elegant togas, we're talking about what it would really feel like to live there for a single day. Spoiler: you wouldn't last until lunchtime. Before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of thing. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, it's always 1:37 a.m. when people decide it's time to learn about Roman plumbing. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan for that soft background hum, and get comfortable. Maybe grab a blanket, you'll need it when the Romans start describing how they cleaned themselves without toilet paper. Let's warm up your imagination. Have you ever wondered how Romans dealt with summer heat without air conditioning or deodorant? How they managed traffic when half the city was full of oxen and the other half of runaway slaves? How it felt to bathe in public with 500 strangers, eat food spiced with questionable fish sauce, and sleep under neighbors who emptied their chamber pots out the window. And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in ancient Rome. It's the year 79 AD. Mount Vesuvius is rumbling somewhere in the distance. Your sandals are already sticking to the street, and someone is shouting about stolen olives. Welcome home. Morning in ancient Rome doesn't begin with birdsong or gentle sunlight. It begins with shouting vendors yelling about bread, carts clattering over stone streets, and your upstairs neighbor arguing with his slave over who stole the leftover wine. You blink awake on a straw mattress that feels like punishment, surrounded by the smell of olive oil, sweat, and regret. There's no alarm clock, no gentle smartphone chime. Your wake-up call is the sound of 50,000 people trying to live their best lives within the same square mile of chaos. Someone's donkey is braying outside your window. A blacksmith is already hammering metal like he's trying to wake Jupiter himself. And a group of street musicians are butchering a tune on double flutes. The city never sleeps. It just takes loud naps. You roll over, trying to hide from the noise, but your bed has other plans. It's not a bed so much as a collection of hay, insects, and disappointment. The straw pokes through the thin linen sheet, the wooden frame wobbles dangerously, and the entire structure creaks like it's considering collapse as a morning hobby. Romans might have invented concrete, but comfort? Not so much. And then there's the smell. Oh, the smell. Your nostrils are assaulted by a cocktail of yesterday's cooking smoke, sweat, perfume, and something faintly fishy because your downstairs neighbor probably spilled garum, that fermented fish sauce everyone's obsessed with. Imagine if soy sauce and anchovy paste had an argument in the sundae. That's garum, and it's everywhere. You sit up and instantly regret it. The air is thick and warm, heavy with city life. Your small apartment, an insula, is one of hundreds stacked like tinderboxes along the narrow streets. The walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor sneeze and thick enough to trap heat like a clay oven. You can practically feel the breath of the entire building pulsing through the plaster. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows. Not because it's dawn that was hours ago, but because Roman roosters don't care about time. They crow whenever they feel like it. The sound echoes down the alley, blending with vendors shouting things like fresh bread and fine olives and buy my fish before it walks away. You rub your eyes and try to shake off the dreams mostly about being crushed under amphorae again and reach for your water jug. It's lukewarm, cloudy, and smells faintly of the Tiber. You take a hesitant sip anyway, because the only other option is cheap wine. And while Romans did love starting the day with a little vinum, it's less glamorous when you're dehydrated, broke, and late for work. The sunlight seeps in through a crack in the shutter. The light isn't soft or golden. It's sharp and blinding, bouncing off white stone buildings and stabbing your eyeballs like divine punishment. Rome is a city made of brightness and dust, the kind that coats your clothes, hair, and dreams by lunchtime. You stretch, hearing every bone crack like the snapping of ancient scrolls. You're 25, which in Roman years is middle management and mild arthritis. You shuffle to the corner where your sandals weight well. Weight is generous. They're two scraps of leather held together by faith. You strap them on anyway because the street outside is paved with sharp stones, trash, and the occasional unfortunate rat. Outside, the city hums like a living organism, chaotic, loud, and always a little too close. You can hear the rhythmic chanting of builders hauling bricks, the neigh of horses, and the hiss of bakers pulling loaves from clay ovens. Smoke curls from chimneys, blending with the scent of baking bread, and the less pleasant aroma of last night's chamber pots being emptied out the window. Rome runs on ambition, wine, and denial. You peek outside your window, which, let's be honest, is more of a hole, and watch the street below come alive. A senator's litter passes by, carried by sweating slaves. Street urchins dart between carts, shouting obscenities that would make Cicero blush. Merchants hawk their wares, beggars tug at togas, and a stray dog confidently steals a sausage from a distracted butcher. It's beautiful, in a chaotic, mildly dangerous way. The city is alive. It's noisy, grimy, and a little unhinged, but there's something magnetic about it. Every clang of metal, every echoing shout, every whiff of smoke reminds you that this is the center of the world. The empire breathes through these streets, and as you step out of your doorway into the Roman morning, dodging a passing cart and a falling piece of roof plaster, one truth becomes clear. Rome doesn't care if you're ready for the day. The day is already happening loudly, fragrantly, and whether you like it or not. You pull your toga tight, squint against the blinding sun, and take your first cautious step into the chaos. The street vendors are already haggling, the orators already shouting, and someone is definitely already stealing your coin purse. Welcome to Rome, where the early bird doesn't catch the worm. It gets mugged by a guy selling figs. Forget your smartphone. In Rome, your alarm is the collective chaos of the city blacksmiths, hammering, donkeys braying, and roosters who apparently never learned about sunrise etiquette. The city doesn't so much wake up as it erupts into consciousness. You never know what wakes you first, a merchant shouting about olives, a cartwheel snapping in the street, or a passing legionnaire whose sandals sound like a stampede of coins. The Roman morning is not peaceful. It's the audio equivalent of being hit by a fresco. Even before dawn, the sounds roll in the clanging of metal, the hiss of bread ovens, the muttered curses of slaves hauling amphorae. Somewhere nearby, a woman argues about rent, and someone else is already reciting poetry far too confidently for 6 a.m. You don't even have to open your eyes to know it's another day in the empire. Your building, an insula packed tighter than a loaf of bread, acts as a giant echo chamber. Every sneeze, every fight, every romantic misunderstanding reverberates through the walls like a low-budget amphitheater performance. The old man upstairs drags his stool across the floor. The kid downstairs practices flute, and it sounds like the dying gasp of a distressed duck. Privacy doesn't exist, only volume. You might think you could tune it out. You can't. The noise seeps into your bones like humidity. Romans had no soundproofing, no double-glazed windows, no quiet hours enforced by polite neighbors. What they did have were arguments. Endless, passionate arguments about politics, prices, and whether Neptune or Jupiter was to blame for the rising cost of olives. And every conversation was conducted at full volume. The rooster, for his part, doesn't care about any of this. He crows from somewhere in the courtyard, not once, not twice, but approximately every 4 minutes. He's the city's original influencer, constantly announcing himself whether anyone asked or not. Romans considered roosters lucky, a sign of good fortune and vigilance. You, however, consider him an auditory curse sent by the gods. And if it's not the rooster, it's the donkeys. Always the donkeys. They bray with the enthusiasm of a brass band and the musicality of a collapsing roof. They haul carts through narrow streets, their hooves clattering on the stones in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like your stress levels rising. Each cart squeaks and rattles like it's carrying the entire economy, which, in a way, it is. Meanwhile, the bakers are hard at work. You can hear the crackle of fire from the pistrina, the Roman bakery at the corner. They're already pounding dough, shouting orders, and occasionally yelling at thieves who think sample means take the whole loaf and run. The scent of warm bread drifts up through the street, a gentle reminder that yes, breakfast exists, but only if you can afford it. Then there are the public water carriers, the aquarii sloshing amphorae down the streets, muttering about how heavy fresh water is today. They spill half of it before reaching their customers, leaving puddles for pedestrians to slip in later. The city's noise is punctuated by the splash of water, the thud of sandals, and the occasional expletive when someone loses their footing. Somewhere across the street, a smith begins hammering bronze. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, and entirely too close to your window. Every strike rings out like a divine reminder that you still haven't left bed. The air fills with the scent of smoke and molten metal, the perfume of progress, or so you tell yourself as you groan into your pillow. Even the animals join in. Stray dogs bark at carts, cats yowl at nothing, pigeons coo from the rooftops like they're running commentary on the chaos. Rome is alive, every corner breathing, braying, or banging. Silence here isn't golden, it's extinct. And yet, despite the noise, there's a strange comfort in it. The clatter, the shouting, the chorus of human and animal life, it's all part of Rome's heartbeat. You can tell the time of day by the soundtrack alone. The baker's shouts at dawn, the merchants at mid-morning, the street preachers in the afternoon. It's like living inside an orchestra that doesn't believe in tuning. You finally give up on sleep and sit up. The room hums with the vibrations of a waking world. You can hear laughter, coughing, the jangle of a money changer counting coins next door. It's chaos, but it's familiar chaos. The city might be loud, but it's also alive, pulsing, breathing, endlessly noisy life. As you splash some tepid water on your face, you realize something. This is the soundtrack of empire. The same cacophony echoes across a million lives from Britannia to Egypt, all beating to Rome's relentless rhythm. You step to the window and look out over the street. Sunlight glinting off rooftops, smoke curling in the air, 1,000 people already arguing their way into history. Welcome to morning in ancient Rome, no alarms, no snooze button. Just pure, unfiltered civilization at full volume. If you ever wondered what the Roman Empire sounded like, it's this. A rooster, a hammer, and about 40,000 people yelling "move" all at once. You live in an insula, a multi-story apartment block made mostly of wood and bad decisions. The walls are thin, the stairs creak ominously, and the upper floors collapse more often than your motivation on a Monday. If you live above the second floor, congratulations, you're poor and flammable. The insulae are the beating heart of Rome's urban chaos, towering, narrow buildings packed with humanity, hope, and the occasional rat the size of a small dog. From a distance, they look impressive. 5, sometimes 6 stories of brick, plaster, and ambition. Up close, they look like a Jenga tower that's one sneeze away from disaster. Romans called them insulae, meaning islands, but really they're closer to shipwrecks, permanently moored to the street. The ground floors belong to the rich shopkeepers, bakers, and money changers who can afford brick walls and the luxury of not dying in a fire every 6 months. Their rooms have mosaics, tiled floors, maybe even windows with real glass. Above them, the middle floors hold artisans and clerks, the working class of the empire close enough to civilization to see it, too broke to join in. And then there's you, on the 4th floor, where the ceilings leak, the floors tilt, and every gust of wind feels like a personal threat. You wake up each morning wondering which will give out first, the stairs, the walls, or your will to live. The wooden beams are so dry they creak just thinking about the word spark. Fire, of course, is your greatest enemy. The Romans didn't have smoke detectors, just smoke, and when an insula caught fire, it burned like a birthday candle for the gods. People joked darkly that if your upstairs neighbor sneezed too hard, you'd lose your home, your savings, and your sandals in one glorious inferno. Your room, apartment, feels too generous is roughly the size of a modern bathroom. You've got a straw mattress, a small clay oil lamp, a jug of water that may or may not contain mystery sediment, and a single shelf holding bread that's as hard as Caesar's ego. The walls are coated in plaster that flakes like ancient dandruff, and the ceiling is so low you've probably hit your head more times than you can count. Privacy? That's for senators. You can hear everything. Your neighbors snoring, someone's argument 2 floors down, and somewhere above, a couple definitely not respecting quiet hours. If you're lucky, you have a small window more a hole than anything letting in sunlight and the pleasant aroma of whatever the butcher's throwing out below. There's no running water, no toilets, and no kitchen. You cook on a small brazier, hoping the smoke finds its way out before you do. Meals are simple: bread, cheese, and the occasional lentil stew, though stew might be too optimistic a word for what's mostly disappointment in liquid form. The stairs are a daily adventure. Each step is an audition for the next landslide, narrow, uneven, and slick with dust. You grip the wall on your way down, whispering a prayer to whichever god handles structural stability. The stairwell is dark, lit only by whatever light trickles in from doorways, and filled with the mixed perfume of humanity, garlic, and despair. Down below, life is bustling. The street-level shops open early, spilling voices and smells into the cramped alley. Bakers shout their prices, blacksmiths hammer, and your landlord, the ever-present Dominus Insulae, strolls through collecting rent like a mob boss in a toga. He doesn't fix anything, of course. If your ceiling caves in, his response will likely be, "Ah yes, Jupiter's will." Every insula has its own ecosystem of chaos. There's the gossip passed up the stairwells like an Olympic torch, the shared chamber pot that everyone pretends isn't overflowing, the children running barefoot through the halls, giggling while you try to remember when you last saw clean water. Even the stray cats have given up pretending to catch mice. They just charge rent in the form of stolen bread. And yet, there's a strange sort of comfort in it. The clamour of neighbours, the smell of cooking, the hum of life. It's noisy, yes, but alive. You know everyone. The old woman who curses at the pigeons, the tailor who sings while sewing, the young couple who argue loudly and make up even louder. This isn't luxury, but it's community, the Roman version of a group chat, only with more shouting and fewer emojis. At night, the sounds change. The laughter fades into murmurs, the last lamps flicker out, and the insula groans as it settles, like a tired old beast dreaming of collapse. You lie awake on your straw mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if the gods will let you have one more day before the beams decide otherwise. But when dawn comes, the city stirs again. You hear the carts rumbling below, smell the bread baking, and feel the sunlight spill in through your tiny window. Somehow, impossibly, the insula still stands. For now, you stretch, dust off your tunic and think, maybe, just maybe, today won't end in fire. But you keep your sandals by the door anyway, just in case Rome decides to remind you how temporary everything here really is. Roman fashion is less about expression and more about survival. You throw on a linen tunic that smells faintly of mildew, then wrestle yourself into a toga, essentially 6 meters of fabric and zero practicality. The Romans might have conquered half the world, but not the concept of comfortable clothing. You start with the tunica, the Roman version of a t-shirt. If t-shirts were made from scratchy linen and designed to absorb every ounce of sweat the Mediterranean could produce. It's not glamorous, but it's essential, a base layer that clings to your skin like a needy cat and smells about as pleasant. Washing it is technically possible, but let's be honest, water's scarce, and soap costs money. You'll probably just air it out, which in Roman terms means letting it bake in the sun until it smells slightly less offensive. If you're wealthy, your tunic is crisp and white, maybe even belted neatly at the waist. If you're not, it's patched, stained, and hangs somewhere between well-worn and archaeological exhibit. Most people own one, maybe 2 tunics total, which means when it rips, and it will, you just keep sewing it back together like a tragic love story that refuses to die. Then comes the toga. Ah yes, the glorious toga, symbol of citizenship, prestige, and upper body suffering. 6 meters of heavy wool that you must drape, twist, and tuck in a way that would make an origami master weep. It's supposed to convey dignity and authority, but mostly it conveys heatstroke. There's a reason no one runs in a toga. You physically can't. You're basically wearing a weighted blanket in a city that regularly hits 35 degrees Celsius. Getting into one requires skill, or, if you're rich enough, a slave whose sole job is to wrap you in the correct number of folds. If you're poor, you're on your own. You throw one end over your shoulder, try to gather the rest without tripping, and hope no one notices that your dignified drape looks more like you lost a fight with your laundry. Togas are not everyday wear for most people. They're formal, ceremonial, and wildly impractical for anything involving movement, weather, or sanity. Most Romans prefer the tunic, and who can blame them? Even senators would peel off their togas the moment they got home, sighing with the relief of a man unhooking a bra after a long day. If you're a woman, congratulations. You have your own daily battle with fabric. Roman women wear a stola, a long sleeveless dress that's layered over a tunic. It's fastened with fibulae, ancient safety pins, and tied with a belt that either cinches your waist or tries to strangle you, depending on how the morning's going. Married women also wear a palla, a shawl or veil draped over the head when outside, both to show modesty and to protect against unsolicited commentary from men who think yelling compliments counts as flirting. Footwear is simple but cruel. Sandals made of stiff leather straps that dig into your feet like small, angry snakes. If you're lucky, you own solely simple indoor sandals. If you're less lucky, you get wooden-soled clogs or nothing at all. Romans didn't have arch support, so after a day of walking on stone streets, your feet feel like you've been marching with the legions. Jewelry is where Romans really show off gold rings, bronze brooches, and occasionally teeth made of ivory, which sounds glamorous until you remember dental hygiene isn't exactly thriving. Perfume exists, but most of it smells like a floral argument mixed with rancid oil. You dab a little on your neck, then realize everyone else did too, and now the street smells like an overconfident garden. As you finish dressing, you catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. It's not flattering, the metal's warped, and so are you. Your toga hangs awkwardly, your sandals squeak, and you're already sweating. You take a deep breath, the wool scratching against your neck like an irritated cat, and remind yourself, this is dignity. This is Roman civilization. This is what separates you from the barbarians, though the barbarians probably wore pants, so maybe they were onto something. Outside, the sun is climbing higher, the air thick with the smells of bread, smoke, and humanity. Your toga feels heavier with each passing minute, trapping heat like a slow cooker. You tug at the edge, trying to keep the folds neat, but a breeze catches the hem, threatening to turn your outfit into a public scandal. Romans didn't have elastic, but they did have shame, and you're hanging onto yours by one badly tied knot. And yet, despite the discomfort, there's a sense of pride in it. The toga is ridiculous, but it's Roman ridiculous. Every drape, every fold declares you a citizen of the greatest empire in the world. You might be sweating through your wool and cursing the gods of laundry, but you're part of something grand. A civilization that believes 6 meters of fabric and a dream can make a man look important. You adjust the folds one last time, grab your sandals, and step out into the street, the morning sun blinding and hot. Somewhere in the distance, another citizen is already tripping over his toga. Misery loves company, and in Rome, everyone's overdressed for the apocalypse. Your Roman breakfast is simple, stale bread dipped in watered wine, maybe an olive if the gods are kind. Coffee hasn't been invented, and yet you're somehow expected to function. You chew slowly, contemplating your life choices, and the faint sound of rats plotting beneath the floor. The Romans called it ientaculum, which sounds fancy enough to make you believe something substantial is coming. It isn't. Breakfast for most Romans is less of a meal and more of a polite suggestion that you keep breathing until lunch. There's no bacon sizzling, no eggs cracking, no comforting smell of toast. Just you, a chunk of yesterday's bread, and a jug of wine diluted with enough water to make you question why you're drinking it at all. The bread, if you can call it that, could probably be used as a weapon. It's hard, dry, and only vaguely edible if you dunk it long enough to soften it. Some Romans added honey or cheese if they could afford it, a rare luxury that made the whole ordeal slightly less tragic. Others just gnawed through it like determined beavers. You take another bite, listening to the crunch echo in your skull, and wonder if the empire's real achievement wasn't aqueducts, but dental resilience. If you're lucky enough to have olives, you savor them like a gift from the gods, small, salty bursts of joy between bites of existential despair. But even then, there's no escaping the monotony. Roman mornings aren't about pleasure, they're about endurance. You eat to survive, not to enjoy. Breakfast is fuel, not fun. Wine, of course, is a constant companion. Not the good kind that's reserved for dinner parties and people who own more than one pair of sandals. Morning wine is cheap, sour, and heavily watered down, because even the Romans realized you can't conquer an empire while hammered before noon. Still, the mild buzz takes the edge off the flavor of disappointment in your bread. You sit by your small brazier, a smoking clay pot that occasionally pretends to be a fire, and try not to think about how many people have already been awake for hours. The baker downstairs has been working since midnight, shoveling loaves into his oven until his face glistens like oiled marble. Street sweepers, market sellers, and slaves have already filled the streets, their day powered by the same sad breakfast you're now choking down. If you're a craftsman, this meager meal will have to last until prandium, the midday snack. That's several hours of labor, noise, and heat away. You swallow the last of your bread, chase it with a sip of lukewarm wine, and try to convince yourself that you're full. The Romans were masters of self-deception. Appetite is weakness, they'd say, usually right before eating 12 courses at a banquet later that night. Breakfast isn't a social event either. There's no gathering at the table, no pleasant chatter, no "how did you sleep" conversation. Everyone eats in silence, often standing, often distracted. The poor eat on the go, the wealthy eat alone, and the slaves eat when they're allowed to. There's no romance in it, just the steady rhythm of survival. Still, Rome being Rome, someone inevitably finds a way to make breakfast political. Philosophers debate whether eating early dulls the mind. Stoics claim you should skip it entirely to build character. Epicureans, naturally, argue that if you're going to suffer anyway, at least eat something nice. Meanwhile, you're caught in the middle, too broke to be an Epicurean, too hungry to be a Stoic, and too tired to be philosophical about anything. The smell of bread lingers in the air, thick and yeasty. Outside, the city is waking up in full force, merchants shouting, carts clattering, children running barefoot through puddles. You can hear the baker yelling at an apprentice, the rhythmic pounding of a blacksmith, the faint chanting of priests down the street. Rome's soundtrack is chaos with percussion. You finish your meal, if you can call it that, and brush the crumbs off your tunic. One falls to the floor, and a rat immediately claims it. You consider fighting it for a moment, but decide the rat probably needs it more. Besides, you have a city to face, and you're already running on fumes and hubris. As you step outside, the morning sunlight strikes your face. You squint, clutching your stomach as it rumbles in protest. Somewhere nearby, a rich man is enjoying fresh figs and warm milk. But you? You've got determination and the faint taste of sour grapes. It's enough to get you to lunchtime, probably. And as you walk through the crowded streets, dodging donkeys and puddles of questionable liquid, you realize the truth. Breakfast in Rome isn't about enjoyment. It's a test. A daily ritual of quiet suffering that says, yes, the world is hard, and so is your bread. Eat it anyway. Because if there's one thing the Romans understood better than anyone else, it's that survival, like breakfast, is rarely sweet, but it's always necessary. You step outside and instantly regret it. The streets are a frenzy of carts, beggars, merchants, and animals, all squeezed into alleys barely wide enough for one donkey. You dodge puddles of, well, let's call it mystery liquid, and wonder how anyone survived long enough to invent plumbing. The first thing that hits you is the noise. Rome doesn't just wake up, it roars to life. Iron wheels screech against cobblestones, merchants bellow their prices, and somewhere nearby, a man is enthusiastically trying to sell a goat that definitely doesn't want to be sold. It's a soundscape of chaos, commerce, and constant yelling. Every conversation is shouted, every argument is public, and every single person believes they're the most important person in the empire. You glance down the narrow street and immediately understand why Romans were always shouting. The city is one giant bottleneck. The Vie, Rome's streets, are paved with uneven stones that tilt, wobble, and collect water, or something worse, in every crevice. Two carts can't pass side by side, so the result is constant gridlock, broken wheels, and a symphony of frustrated braying. And yes, sometimes that braying comes from humans. The air is thick with the smell of live bread baking, sweat, rotting vegetables, wet animals, and something faintly fishy from the nearby Macellum, the market. Rome's famous sewers might exist, but you wouldn't know it from the smell. Chamber pots are emptied straight into the streets, sometimes right from the window above your head. That's why Romans invented the hooded cloak, not for rain, but for self-defense. The sidewalks, where they exist at all, are elevated above the muck. You hop between stepping stones set in the road, trying not to slip. Carts can barely navigate between them, and pedestrians dart across like nervous frogs avoiding wheels. Every step feels like a gamble between dignity and disaster. Somewhere in the crowd, a child laughs as someone loses a sandal in the sludge. The Romans called it urban life. You might call it a health hazard. Vendors crowd every inch of space. Bread sellers wave their loaves like flags. Butchers display meat that's been hanging in the sun since yesterday. Wine sellers shout promises of only mildly watered, and fishmongers slap their catches on the table with a noise that would wake Neptune himself. The richer citizens hurry past, pulling their togas close to avoid touching anything or anyone. The poor don't bother. Grime is part of the wardrobe. You pass a public fountain where people gather to fill jars. Children splash in the water while a woman washes a tunic that will be dirty again in minutes. Slaves carry amphorae of wine, their faces blank with exhaustion. Street performers play flutes and juggle, hoping for a few coins. You toss one in their bowl, only for it to be immediately snatched by a passing thief. Rome's economy runs on trade, taxes, and pickpocketing. Above you, laundry flaps between windows, creating a patchwork sky of togas, tunics, and what might be someone's undergarments. You can hear an argument breaking out 2 floors up, a couple screaming about money, or maybe politics. Hard to tell which. In Rome, both sound the same. A few buildings down, a man reads aloud from a scroll, performing poetry for anyone who'll listen or at least pretend to. Traffic is relentless. Carts piled with amphorae rumble by, their drivers cracking whips and shouting insults that would make Cicero blush. Pedestrians are forced to flatten themselves against walls to let them pass. Every so often, a Roman official strides through with a small entourage, barking orders about road repairs that will never happen. You try to follow, but the crowd swallows you up again. Rome doesn't care who you are. It moves at its own pace. Stray dogs weave through the crowd, noses to the ground hunting scraps. A beggar tugs your sleeve, showing you a bandaged leg that looks like it might actually be cursed. You toss him a coin and keep walking. Compassion is a luxury, and so is stopping. The press of bodies is constant, warm, alive, and inescapable. You can't take 2 steps without bumping into someone selling figs, someone shouting about taxes, or someone just yelling because that's how Romans communicate. And yet, amid the chaos, there's something magnetic about it. The marble temples gleam in the distance, columns rise above the dirt and noise, catching the sunlight like beacons of order in a world that doesn't have any. The contrast is absurd, elegant architecture beside open drains, senators brushing shoulders with slaves. It's a city of contradictions, grandeur built on grime. You stop at a street corner and take it all in. The shouting, the smells, the movement, it's overwhelming, but it's life. Real, relentless, ridiculous life. You can see why Romans bragged about their city. It's not beautiful in the traditional sense. It's not peaceful, or clean, or kind. But it's alive in a way no other place could be. A cart splashes through a puddle beside you, soaking your sandals. You sigh, look down at your toga, and realize it's now 2 shades darker. Welcome to Rome, the heart of the world, where civilization thrives, chaos reigns, and your laundry never stands a chance. You decide to clean up at the Thermae, Rome's public baths, basically the ancient world's version of a crowded gym locker room. You strip down with hundreds of strangers, soak in tepid water, and try not to think about how many people peed in it before you. The Romans prided themselves on their bathing culture. It wasn't just hygiene, it was an event, a social ritual, a place to gossip, make business deals, or judge everyone's sandals. The Thermae were less relaxing spa, and more the entire population of a small town in one steamy building. Everyone went: senators, soldiers, slaves, philosophers, merchants, and probably the guy who sold you spoiled olives this morning. You walk through the entrance, paying a small fee to the balneator, the bath attendant, who looks you up and down like he's seen far too many naked people in his lifetime, because he has. You hand over your sandals and tunic, which are promptly stored in a cubby that provides approximately 0 security. Theft is rampant here. The only thing more likely to go missing than your clothes is your dignity. The air inside is thick with steam, laughter, and the faint smell of body oil and ambition. The floor is warm beneath your feet, heated by the hypercourse system, a network of pipes carrying hot air beneath the tiles. The Romans were architectural geniuses, but apparently they never figured out that trapping hundreds of sweaty people in one humid room turns it into a human soup. First stop, the apodyterium, the changing room. It's crowded, echoing with chatter and the sound of slapping sandals. Men of all shapes and sizes wander around casually, utterly unbothered by nudity. You, meanwhile, are wondering where to look that doesn't result in direct eye contact with someone who's discussing tax policy while completely naked. Romans had no concept of personal space or shame. Next is the tepidarium, the warm room, the gateway drug to the hotter baths. It's pleasantly warm, filled with steam that softens your skin and your will to live. Marble benches line the walls, slick with condensation, where men recline, gossiping about politics or gladiators. You sit down, immediately sliding halfway across the bench because everything here is just slightly too moist. Then comes the caldarium, the hot room. The moment you step in, it hits you like a Roman chariot, blistering heat, and a fog so thick you could lose an empire in it. Sweat pours from your body instantly. The floor burns your feet, the air burns your lungs, and you begin questioning your life choices. It's both a sauna and an endurance test. People claim it opens the pores, but you're pretty sure it's just cooking you slowly from the inside out. You spot a few bathers lounging in the hot pool, lazily chatting as though they aren't being gently poached. Steam rises around them in ghostly curls. You ease yourself in, gasping as the water hits your skin. It's both soothing and unsettling, the kind of warmth that says, "You're clean, but at what cost?" Across the pool, two old men argue loudly about whether Caesar was divine, while another man quietly trims his toenails. You consider leaving civilization altogether. After the heat, you stumble into the frigidarium, the cold bath. It's the Roman equivalent of an ice plunge, and the shock hits you like divine punishment. Every nerve in your body screams, your teeth chatter, and you can't tell if you're awake or being reborn. The locals dive in with glee, shouting and splashing like children. You, however, resemble a startled fish gasping for purpose. And just when you think you're done, comes the strigil treatment. Since soap isn't a thing yet, you smear olive oil all over your body, then scrape it off with a curved metal blade, the strigil. It's equal parts exfoliation and humiliation. A slave assists you, methodically scraping away oil, sweat, and whatever's left of your will to live. You try not to think about how many other bodies that same tool has touched today. Spoiler, it's a lot. Once you're clean, debatable. You dry off with a rough linen cloth that's about as absorbent as a political promise. You apply a little scented oil if you can afford it, perhaps rose or myrrh, though the effect is quickly overpowered by the overall bouquet of hot stone, human musk, and faint mildew. The baths are also a place of business. Men stroll around debating trade deals, slaves run errands for their masters, and philosophers give impromptu lectures to anyone unlucky enough to make eye contact. You overhear someone discussing tax evasion while another loudly praises the virtues of cabbage. It's all very intellectual, in the same way that arguing in a sauna is intellectual. You wander through the palestra, the attached exercise yard. Half-naked men wrestle, throw discus, or lift heavy stones for fun because apparently sweating once in the baths wasn't enough. Dust swirls in the hot air, sticking to every freshly scrubbed surface. Congratulations, you're now dirty again. Finally, you make your way out, handing the balneator a coin for his trouble, or perhaps for not losing your clothes. You step back into the sunlight, blinking, steaming, and deeply uncertain whether you're cleaner or just marinated. The baths may not have been private, hygienic, or relaxing, but they were Rome's great equalizer, a daily reminder that under the marble and might, everyone still sweats, smells, and scrapes off the grime the same way. Civilization, it turns out, is mostly a shared steam room with better architecture. Soap doesn't exist. Instead, you smear oil on your skin and scrape it off with a curved metal blade called a strigil. It's like an exfoliating spa day, if spa days involved body grease and questionable hygiene. You'd think after sweating through the caldarium, that boiling marble sauna from Hades, the next step would be a rinse, maybe a nice cold shower. But no. The Romans, in all their architectural brilliance, decided the best way to clean the human body was to marinate it in olive oil and then scrape it like a particularly uncooperative vegetable. You dip your fingers into a small flask of oil, the ampulla, and start rubbing it into your skin. The oil is thick, warm, and slightly sticky. It smells faintly of olives, smoke, and regret. The theory is simple. The oil loosens the dirt and sweat, traps it, and when scraped off, takes the grime with it. The reality is moist. You now glisten like a buttered statue, slick and slippery, trying not to drop the strigil on your foot. The strigil itself is a crescent-shaped piece of bronze or iron, designed to scrape oil, dirt, and dead skin from your body. It's both fascinating and vaguely threatening, like something you'd use to clean a horse, not yourself. You take a deep breath and drag it across your arm. Instantly, a mixture of oil, sweat, and skin residue curls up under the blade like ancient yogurt. You stare at it, questioning everything you know about cleanliness. Nearby, other bathers are doing the same, chatting casually as they exfoliate themselves raw. Some have slaves doing the scraping for them because nothing says wealth like outsourcing your personal lubrication. The attendants move efficiently, scraping backs, shoulders, and legs with the briskness of people who've done this far too many times. Occasionally someone yelps. It's all very communal. There's no such thing as personal space in the thermae. You're shoulder to shoulder with strangers, everyone glistening in various stages of oil and existential dread. The sound of scraping fills the air, a chorus of metallic whispers, and the occasional grunt of discomfort. If you close your eyes, you might imagine it soothing, like 1,000 tiny rakes combing a Zen garden. If you open them, you realize it's a bunch of sweaty men being flayed in unison. The oil itself is reused more than you'd like to know. Most of it ends up on the floor, or mixed with dirt and hair, forming a grimy paste that slaves later collect for lamp fuel or cosmetics. Nothing in Rome goes to waste, not even the byproduct of your exfoliation nightmare. Somewhere, someone's lighting a dinner party with the remnants of today's scrub session. As you continue scraping, you start to notice that your skin actually feels lighter, softer. You might even be clean. Or maybe you've just removed an entire layer of epidermis and your nerves are too traumatized to complain. The Romans swore by this process, claiming it improved circulation and kept the body pure. Modern dermatologists would probably just stare in horror. After the scraping, it's time for a massage, because of course, after you've scraped yourself raw, the next logical step is to have someone knead your muscles with more oil. A young attendant slathers you again and begins pressing your back with the enthusiasm of someone tenderizing meat. You make a noise somewhere between pleasure and pain, which in Rome is basically a compliment. Philosophers frequented the baths, and you can almost hear one nearby waxing poetic about how the strigil represents the moral cleansing of the soul. Just as we scrape the filth from our flesh, he might say, so too must we scrape vice from our hearts. You would nod thoughtfully, but you're too busy trying not to slip on a puddle of communal oil. When it's over, you stand up, gleaming like a rotisserie chicken, and take stock of your life choices. You smell faintly of olives, smoke, and hubris. Your skin tingles, whether from rejuvenation or mild trauma. It's hard to tell. You dab yourself dry with a linen cloth that's seen better days, and for a moment you feel Roman, clean, in the way only someone who's just endured public exfoliation can. As you leave, a slave collects your discarded oil mixture in a bucket. You don't ask what it's for. You don't want to know. You step back into the sunlight, squinting, your skin slick and radiant like a marble statue that's learned regret. You've survived the strigil, the ancient beauty ritual that somehow combined hygiene, social interaction, and mild assault into one experience. It's both horrifying and oddly effective. And as you walk down the marble steps of the thermae, one thought stays with you. The Romans might not have had soap, but they definitely knew how to suffer in style. ChatGPT can, fountain maken, controlia belangrica informity, Z, cookie vorkuren, toilet paper, no, perfume, overused, toothpaste, crushed bones and ashes. The Romans were brilliant engineers but truly terrible at smelling nice. Even their famous baths couldn't mask the citywide aroma of fish sauce and humanity. It's ironic, really. This was a civilization that built aqueducts capable of carrying water for miles, yet somehow forgot that the people on the receiving end might want to smell less like damp wool and despair. Roman hygiene was a fascinating contradiction. Public baths on every corner, but streets full of sewage, marble fountains spouting crystal clear water, yet not a bar of soap in sight. Let's start with Act 1. The teeth. The Roman smile or grimace, depending on the lighting, was maintained using a toothpaste made from crushed animal bones, oyster shells, and the occasional sprinkle of charcoal or bark. The texture was gritty. Imagine brushing your teeth with a handful of gravel and good intentions. And the minty fresh flavor we take for granted today? Nowhere to be found. Some Romans even used urine as a whitening agent. Yes, you heard that right. Human urine. Imported, in fact, from Portugal because apparently Portuguese pee had that special something. It was mixed into dental powders and even used as mouthwash. So if a Roman ever smiled at you a little too close, congratulations. You just met history's worst breath. Now for Act 2. The body. You might assume the famously bath-obsessed Romans were squeaky clean. But clean is a relative term. Public baths were less about sanitation and more about socializing. Sure, they scraped off oil and grime with their trusty strigils, but without soap or disinfectants, most of that clean was simply redistributed. The bathwater was rarely changed, meaning that by midday it was basically human soup. A tepid broth of sweat, oil, and civic pride. Once out of the baths, Romans doused themselves in perfume gallons of it. Scents like rose, myrrh, and cinnamon filled the air, thick enough to choke a senator. Men and women alike layered so much fragrance that ancient writers complained of odor battles in public gatherings. The wealthy smelled like entire gardens, the poor like they'd tried to hug one. And while perfume did wonders for masking body odor, it didn't change the fact that underneath the lavender and rose oil was still, well, a person who hadn't met soap. Shaving was also a key part of hygiene, though hygiene might be too generous a word. Barbershops or tonstronai were community hubs where men went to get shaved, gossip, and occasionally be injured. Razors were dull, sanitation non-existent, and infections common. You'd leave looking slightly neater but probably with at least one new bacterial adventure. Still, it was better than growing a beard thick enough to house its own micro-empire. Now for Act 3. The bathroom. Public toilets, or latrinae, were an architectural marvel. In the same way, a traffic jam is a marvel of logistics. Rows of stone benches with holes sat side by side. No dividers, no privacy, just friendly eye contact and conversation, while nature took its course. Beneath the seats ran a constant stream of water, theoretically washing waste away. The problem? The water often came from the same aqueducts that supplied nearby fountains. So yes, that clean, trickling water you just used to wash your hands might have recently met your neighbor's lunch. As for toilet paper, forget it. Romans used a tessorium, a communal sponge on a stick. After use, it was rinsed in a bucket of salty or vinegary water and then passed to the next user. Nothing says civilization quite like sharing bathroom accessories with 40 strangers. Some historians claim each person brought their own sponge, but considering how many Romans complained about infections, let's just say, not everyone was that conscientious. To complete the trifecta of tragedy, consider Roman deodorant, or rather, the lack of it. The average Roman day involved hours in the sun, no air conditioning, and clothing made entirely of wool. You could cover yourself in rose oil, sure, but by lunchtime, you'd still smell like a baked shepherd. Even the emperors weren't immune. Nero reportedly drenched himself in perfume daily. Yet his dinner guests still fainted during the hotter months. And yet, despite it all, Romans thought they were the cleanest people in the world. Compared to barbarians bathing once a year, maybe they were. But to a modern nose, the entire empire would smell like a combination of olive oil, sweat, and despairing citrus. So next time you step out of a hot shower, freshly scrubbed and wrapped in a fluffy towel, take a moment to thank your plumbing, your soap, and your toothbrush that doesn't hiss when you open it. Because in ancient Rome, hygiene wasn't about being clean, it was about pretending you were. And in that grand performance of civilization, everyone played their part, glistening, perfumed, and profoundly unwashed. When nature calls, you head to a latrina, a long stone bench with holes and zero privacy. Everyone sits shoulder to shoulder, like a very unfortunate dinner party. The communal sponge on a stick is passed around for wiping. Yes, It's as bad as it sounds. Let's get this out of the way. There is nothing glamorous about Roman plumbing. Sure, they invented aqueducts, sewers, and drains, but when it came to actually using the facilities, civilization took a bit of a step back. Public toilets were everywhere, tucked behind bathhouses, markets, and forums. And while they were marvels of engineering, they were also the most chaotic social spaces imaginable. The latrinae were communal, open, and usually buzzing with conversation. Imagine walking into a long marble room, lined with benches that have large, perfectly circular holes cut out like a row of stone thrones for the least royal experience of your life. There are no doors, no partitions, and definitely no privacy. Instead, you find 20 to 30 other Romans already seated, chatting about politics, gladiator matches, and dinner plans, all while doing their business. You take a seat, awkwardly trying not to make eye contact with the man next to you, who's currently discussing tax reform. Beneath you runs a shallow channel of water designed to carry waste away. It's an ingenious idea, until you realize that water isn't moving very fast, and away might mean eventually. The smell is indescribable, a powerful mix of ammonia, vinegar, human achievement, and human regret. Romans were surprisingly social about this whole ordeal. For them, the latrina was a place of bonding. Men and women didn't share facilities, thankfully. But among men, business deals were struck, gossip was exchanged, and friendships were forged, all while seated on what was essentially a public bench of doom. Historians have found graffiti scratched into the walls of these toilets, full of jokes, insults, and the kind of bathroom humor that transcends centuries. Then there's the infamous tessorium, the communal sponge on a stick. It was stored in a bucket of salty or vinegary water at the front of the toilet for sanitation. When finished, you'd rinse it, pass it along, and the next person would use it. Yes, it was shared. No, there was no health inspection. Modern germ theory didn't exist, and bacteria were just tiny, invisible surprises. If you think sharing a towel at the gym is gross, imagine this ancient nightmare of community spirit. You might be wondering, didn't the Romans get sick? Constantly. Parasites, infections, and skin conditions were rampant. Archaeologists have even found evidence of intestinal worms in Roman remains, probably courtesy of these shared experiences. But for the Romans, this was normal. Everyone smelled vaguely bad. Everyone had something itchy, and nobody had invented the word unsanitary yet. And the latrina wasn't just disgusting, it was dangerous. The sewers below could emit flammable methane gas, which occasionally caused spontaneous explosions. Imagine sitting in a public toilet and hearing a whoosh, followed by screams, not exactly the kind of atmosphere that encourages relaxation. Fires, rats, and even snakes, slithering up through the holes, were also not unheard of. The phrase, "caught with your pants down," might have originated from someone trying to dodge a sewer serpent. Still, there was a strange sense of civic pride in Roman toilets. They were symbols of progress, proof that Rome had conquered not just nations but nature itself. Compared to the mud pits of barbarian tribes, a marble bench and running water, no matter how questionable, felt downright luxurious. Wealthy citizens even had private toilets attached to their homes, though most still emptied into the same public sewer system, so the difference was mostly aesthetic. The Romans were so proud of their sanitation system that they even built shrines to Cloacina, the goddess of sewers. Yes, they had a deity for drainage. Offerings were made to ensure the sewers flowed smoothly because in a world without plumbers, divine intervention was your only maintenance plan. You finish your business as gracefully as one can, in a room full of echoing splashes and philosophical conversation. A man on your left offers you the tessorium with a casual nod. You accept it reluctantly, silently promising never to shake hands again. When you're done, you rinse it in the vinegar bucket and place it back, pretending you feel cleaner than before. You don't. As you stand, the full sensory assault of the latrina hits you: the heat, the smell, the damp stone underfoot. You step carefully toward the exit, trying not to think about what you might be walking in. Outside, the fresh air feels divine. You take a deep breath and vow to hold it next time until you're home. And yet, the Romans managed to turn even this into a communal art form. A place where laughter, gossip, and the smell of humanity mixed into one unforgettable experience. It was filthy, loud, and dangerous, but also weirdly democratic. Everyone, from slave to senator, eventually ended up on the same stone bench, facing the same truth. In the end, no matter how great your toga, you're still just another human with bad timing and worse plumbing. Unless you're a senator, you're not. Your Roman day involves endless labor. Maybe you're a builder, sweating in the sun as marble dust chokes the air, or a merchant shouting prices over a mob, or worse, a slave, which means you're doing all the above, unpaid. Rome is a city that never sleeps, mostly because it can't afford to. Every corner hums with industry, the clang of hammers, the bellow of merchants, the shuffle of sandals on stone. The empire doesn't run on glory and marble. It runs on sweat, calluses, and the desperate hope of making it to lunchtime without collapsing. If you're a builder, your morning starts at dawn. You're hauling bricks, mixing lime mortar, or chiseling stone under the watchful glare of a foreman who looks like he's been angry since birth. Dust fills your lungs, sweat stings your eyes, and you start wondering if maybe becoming a gladiator would have been a better career move. You wear no protective gear, of course just your tunic, your sandals, and your fading will to live. You work with tools that are either dangerously sharp or completely useless, sometimes both at once. By noon, your back aches, your hands are raw, and you've probably been yelled at by at least 3 people who own you in different ways. If you're a merchant, your day's no easier. You drag your cart of goods to the market square, the Forum Holitorium, and try to stake out a spot before someone else does. You shout your prices. Over 100 other shouting voices, all trying to sell bread, figs, olive oil, or occasionally something suspicious that once had legs. You barter, haggle, and argue until your throat's dry and your patience is dust. Every customer thinks they're clever, every rival thinks you're cheating them, and you just want to make enough money to afford dinner that doesn't taste like disappointment. Then there are the craftsmen, the blacksmiths, potters, tanners, and weavers who fill the city's alleys with smoke and noise. The blacksmith's shop is like a furnace with a temper sparks flying, metal clanging, and the air thick with the scent of burning hair. Don't ask. The tanners are worse. They soak hides in vats of urine to soften them, which means an entire neighborhood smells like a festival of despair. Rome might have been the heart of civilization, but it also smelled like one giant, overcooked sandal. If you're a slave, your job depends entirely on who owns you. You might be a kitchen slave, stirring pots big enough to drown in, or a farmhand harvesting olives until your hands turn green. If you're lucky, and that's doing a lot of work for the word lucky, you might serve in a noble household, cleaning floors or fanning your master while pretending you don't dream about pushing him down the stairs. Some slaves are tutors or accountants, educated but still property. Others are chained to mills, turning grinding stones from dawn to dusk until their backs bend permanently. The empire's luxury rests squarely on your exhaustion. Even freedmen, former slaves, rarely catch a break. You might own a small workshop or run errands for wealthier patrons, always hustling for favor, always watching your step. Freedom in Rome isn't so much liberation as it is an expensive lease on your own survival. Lunch, or prandium, is your only reprieve, a brief pause for bread, cheese, and a sip of wine before diving back into the chaos. There are no coffee breaks, no paid leave, no wellness days. Rome's wellness policy is don't die. The sun beats down, the dust rises, and you trudge on because stopping isn't an option. Evening doesn't mean rest. It means cleanup, counting coins, or mending tools by lamplight. Merchants pack up their stalls, sweeping crumbs and dreams into the gutter. Builders stagger home, covered in grime. Slaves tend to their masters' dinners before curling up in storage rooms that barely fit their bodies. The rich feast, the poor collapse, and tomorrow promises to look exactly the same. But amid the exhaustion, there's a strange sort of pride. The city hums with purpose. Every stone, every arch, every loaf of bread owes its existence to someone's backbreaking labor. You might not be rich, but you're part of the machine that keeps the empire running. As the sky darkens and the streets quiet, you wipe the sweat from your brow and glance at the glowing horizon. Rome gleams, golden and eternal, built on the strength of 1,000 tired hands. You take one last breath of the warm, smoky air and think, maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will be better. It won't be. But that's the Roman way to work, to endure, and to keep hustling under the sun, because quitting isn't something the empire allows. The forum is where everyone gathers to gossip, argue, trade, and occasionally riot. Senators stroll by pretending to work. Philosophers debate loudly about nothing, and you're mostly just trying not to get pickpocketed. This is the beating heart of Rome, not just a marketplace, but the empire's social media feed, rumor mill, and town hall, all rolled into one. It's where power is flaunted, politics performed, and patience tested. The sound hits you first, the endless roar of voices bouncing off marble columns and stone walls. Thousands of Romans, all talking at once, as if volume alone could win an argument. You make your way through the crowd, clutching your coin purse like a newborn. Everyone's shouting something: street vendors hawking olives, politicians delivering speeches, lawyers yelling about inheritance disputes, and somewhere in the distance, a man loudly selling miracle ointments that almost definitely contain lead. The forum is chaos in a toga. If you squint past the mob, you can spot the Curia, the Senate House, where old men in pristine white togas are supposedly running the empire. In reality, most are half asleep or scheming about who to stab metaphorically or otherwise. You'd think being surrounded by marble and history would make them noble. But no, it's more like watching a group chat full of passive-aggressive uncles. Every speech begins with, "My esteemed colleague," and ends with an insult dressed up as philosophy. Near the rostra, the speaker's platform, a politician is addressing a restless crowd. His toga is perfectly folded, his voice booming, his gestures dramatic. He's talking about the glory of Rome, the greatness of the people, and the need for unity, while everyone around you argues about the price of bread. Half the crowd cheers, half boos, and one guy just uses the noise to cover up the fact he's stealing figs from a nearby stall. Democracy, Roman style. You sidestep a group of philosophers debating something deep and urgent, like whether virtue is innate or if pigeons have souls. Their audience consists mostly of students pretending to understand, and one drunk man nodding thoughtfully. The philosophers argue passionately, their robes flapping in the breeze, each convinced they're changing the world. You join in, but you're still recovering from the last conversation you had about taxes. The forum isn't just politics, it's also business. Merchants line the edges, setting up makeshift stalls piled high with produce, spices, fabrics, and occasionally something you suspect was stolen from a temple. Deals are struck, hands shaken, coins exchanged. The rich bargain with flair, the poor with desperation. Somewhere nearby, a money changer is counting coins on a small wooden table, licking his thumb between each one, which feels unsanitary but historically accurate. And of course, there are the gossipers. Rome runs on gossip the way the aqueducts run on water. You overhear snippets everywhere, whispers about senators' affairs, generals' failures, and whose slave ran away with whose wife. Information spreads faster here than in any scroll. If something scandalous happens in the city, it'll be common knowledge by lunchtime, exaggerated by dinner, and a full-blown conspiracy by morning. Street performers add to the noise. Jugglers toss knives in front of temples, musicians play out of tune flutes, and acrobats flip for coins while shouting kids chase after them. The forum is entertainment, politics, business, and crime, a civic carnival where everyone's part of the show. You glance up at the grand temples surrounding the square, the Temple of Saturn, the Temple of Castor and Pollux, all towering reminders of how seriously Romans take looking impressive. And yet, beneath the grandeur, everything feels a little improvised. Merchants argue over space, pigeons decorate statues, and stray dogs weave through the crowd like professional pickpockets. A senator nearly trips over a sleeping beggar, mutters about the decline of Rome, and continues his speech without missing a beat. You find a spot by a column to rest and take in the view. The sunlight bounces off polished marble, creating a glare that could blind an optimist. You can see the Colosseum in the distance, the Palatine Hill rising above, and the endless tide of people moving through the square: soldiers on leave, housewives buying vegetables, slaves running errands, children chasing each other through history. It's overwhelming, but strangely hypnotic. The forum isn't just a place, it's Rome itself distilled. Loud, proud, argumentative, and constantly on the verge of brilliance or collapse. You can feel the pulse of the empire here, the ambition, the ego, the endless chatter that holds it all together. A man brushes past you, and you immediately check your coin purse. It's lighter. Of course it is. Somewhere in the crowd, someone's celebrating their successful withdrawal from your personal bank account. You sigh, adjust your toga, and glance around at the marble chaos of humanity. Because this is the Roman Forum, the empire's loudest group chat, where everyone has an opinion, no one listens, and somehow, against all odds, civilization keeps moving forward. Midday arrives, and your stomach growls. You find a thermopolium, a Roman snack bar, and order bread with cheese and a dollop of garum, a fermented fish sauce that smells like a crime. You eat it anyway, because the alternative is starvation. Lunch in ancient Rome isn't about indulgence, it's about survival. By now, the city is boiling under the midday sun, the marble streets reflecting heat like a grudge. The forum has emptied out. Even the politicians have stopped arguing long enough to eat something vaguely edible. You, like most Romans without a private cook, head to the nearest thermopolium, a bustling little tavern where the air smells like oil, garlic, and ambition. Inside, it's standing room only. The walls are decorated with faded frescoes of happier food than what's actually being served, and the countertop is dotted with big terracotta jars, sunk into the surface, each one bubbling, steaming, or congealing with some mysterious concoction. You squeeze in between two men arguing about chariot racing and a woman feeding scraps to her mangy-looking dog, and you try not to breathe too deeply. The garum hits you immediately. It's everywhere, in the air, in the food, in your nightmares. Made by fermenting fish guts in the sun until they surrender to decomposition, garum is the Romans' answer to ketchup, except it smells like Poseidon's armpit and has the consistency of regret. And yet, it's in everything. Bread, stew, wine, and probably the water. The Romans love it so much that entire industries revolve around it. Amphorae of the stuff are shipped across the empire, turning the Mediterranean into one big salty perfume factory. You order the standard prandium, stale bread, a wedge of cheese, and maybe some olives or lentils if you're feeling fancy. The bread is as hard as a helmet, so you dunk it into watered wine, or a bit of garum to soften it. The cheese is sharp and crumbly, and the olives taste like they were cured in equal parts salt and disappointment. A few other patrons are eating barley porridge, while one man spoons something suspiciously grey out of a bowl that's definitely moving. You spot a group of soldiers at a corner table, their armor piled beside them, shouting over a platter of sausages and boiled cabbage. The smell suggests the cabbage lost the battle. A slave hurries between tables, refilling cups of wine and scraping plates into a bucket destined for the pigs who will, in a few days, end up right back on those same plates. It's the circle of Roman culinary life. If you're lucky, your thermopolium has access to the good stuff. Chickpeas, figs, maybe even a bit of salted pork. But luck is rare, and salt is expensive, so most Romans make do with whatever's left from yesterday's market or whatever fell off someone else's cart this morning. You try not to think too hard about what's in the stew. The less you know, the easier it goes down. A poet in the corner is lecturing anyone who'll listen about moderation, while simultaneously eating his weight in honey cakes. Across the room, a drunk man is attempting to flirt with the tavern owner's wife, who's holding a ladle that looks like it could double as a weapon. The entire room smells like sweat, vinegar, and slightly burnt dreams. You take another bite and chase it with wine, so watered down it might legally be classified as damp air. Despite all this, the atmosphere is oddly cheerful. The Romans treat lunch as a necessary pause, a brief escape from the chaos outside. People gossip, trade news, and argue about whose cousin owes whose cousin money. Even the poorest patrons laugh between bites of questionable stew. Hunger has a way of bonding people, and in Rome you're never alone in your suffering. Outside, the noise of the city continues. Cartwheels rattling, hawkers shouting, street performers juggling in the Sunday. You sit for a while, watching the dust dance in the light. A cat slinks between the tables, eyeing your bread with the same suspicion you're eyeing it. You break off a piece and toss it to the ground. It sniffs it, frowns as much as a cat can, and walks away. Even the animals have standards. When you finish eating, you wipe your hands on your tunic and toss a few coins onto the counter. The balneator, the owner, nods without looking up, too busy yelling at a slave to stir the pot faster. You step outside, blinking against the sunlight, your stomach full but your spirit only partially satisfied. As you walk away, you catch a whiff of another thermopolium down the street and realize they all smell the same, like history's worst fish market. You can't help but marvel at the Romans' dedication to their craft. They conquered the known world, but apparently couldn't conquer the urge to ferment seafood until it became a condiment. You take one last deep breath of the garum-scented air, your hunger sated and your nose mildly traumatized. Lunch in Rome might not be glamorous, but it's a lesson in resilience. You've survived another meal, another day, and another helping of the empire's signature dish, proof that sometimes greatness isn't about taste. It's about enduring the smell and pretending it's culture. You join the crowd heading to the Colosseum, Rome's favorite entertainment venue, part sports arena, part horror show. The crowd roars as gladiators fight for their lives. You cheer too, mostly because everyone else is doing it, and you don't want to look unpatriotic. The air is electric, heavy with excitement, sweat, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation and possibly blood. Today's games are all anyone's talking about. The emperor himself is said to be attending, which means the stakes are high and the executions will be particularly theatrical. You join the procession of citizens funneling through Rome's streets, all heading in the same direction like ants toward a picnic they probably won't survive. The Colosseum towers above the city, an architectural marvel that screams, Rome is rich and dangerous. Its curved arches gleam in the sunlight, banners fluttering overhead, while vendors line the road selling roasted nuts, cheap wine, and small souvenirs shaped like thumbs, a nod to the infamous thumbs up, thumbs down tradition. You pass a man selling wooden figurines of gladiators, shouting, "Bring home your favorite killer." It's unsettlingly cheerful marketing. Getting into the Colosseum is an ordeal of its own. The entrances are labeled by class. Senators and nobles glide effortlessly into the shaded marble seats closest to the arena, while you, a humble citizen, join the masses, climbing the steep stairs to the cheap seats. Slaves, foreigners, and the poor pack the upper tiers, each armed with sunburns, wineskins, and unshakable enthusiasm. The air grows hotter with each step, the smell of humanity thicker. You squeeze between two large men, debating which gladiator will die first, and find a small patch of stone to sit on. From up here, the view is incredible and terrifying. The arena stretches out below like a vast sandpit of death, perfectly oval, surrounded by tiers of spectators screaming themselves hoarse. The marble gleams, the sunlight glares, and the noise is deafening. Somewhere below, the emperor takes his seat beneath a golden canopy, flanked by attendants waving peacock feather fans. The crowd erupts in cheers, because not cheering for the emperor is an excellent way to disappear. The day begins with Venetianese wild animal hunts. Cages open, and exotic beasts are released into the arena. Lions, leopards, and bears imported from faraway lands, confused and angry to find themselves in Italy. Hunters armed with spears and nets run out to meet them, while the crowd leans forward in delight. A leopard lunges, a man dodges, the crowd gasps, and you pretend not to think about the logistics of shipping a tiger across the Mediterranean. After the animals comes the ludus, the main event, the gladiators. They enter to fanfare and trumpets, each dressed according to their fighting class. Some wear heavy armor, others almost nothing. You can see the glint of helmets, the flash of blades, the sand shifting under their feet. These men are slaves, prisoners, or volunteers seeking fame. The crowd cheers for their favorites like modern sports fans, chanting names, waving hands, and placing bets. You don't have a favorite yet, but peer pressure is strong, so you shout along anyway. A horn sounds. Two gladiators circle each other, swords drawn, eyes locked. The fight begins slow, cautious, then bursts into chaos, clashing steel, grunts, blood on the sand. The crowd roars with each hit. When one man falls, there's a moment of collective suspense. He raises his hand, pleading. The victor looks to the emperor. The emperor pauses, milking the silence. Then the thumb signal. Sometimes up, sometimes down, always final. You find yourself holding your breath as the crowd decides who lives and who becomes tomorrow's gossip. Between fights, slaves sweep the arena clean, a gruesome intermission. Vendors climb the stands, selling wine, bread, and sausages. You take a sip of sour wine and immediately regret it, but it helps wash down the moral discomfort. Around you, people laugh, argue, and boo at the next pairing of fighters. Children wave little wooden swords, imitating the combatants. Rome's idea of family fun is intense. By afternoon, the heat is brutal, the crowd half drunk, and the violence escalating. Multiple gladiators fight at once, now chaos orchestrated to keep boredom at bay. You watch, equal parts horrified and fascinated, as a man loses his shield and keeps swinging anyway. The crowd loves him. There's something disturbingly human about the way everyone craves the spectacle, the drama, the fleeting illusion of control. When the final horn sounds, the arena is a haze of dust, blood, and noise. The emperor rises, waves, and exits with pomp. The crowd slowly begins to disperse, buzzing with excitement, retelling the best kills as if they were plays or sporting highlights. You follow the flow of bodies back into the sunlight, ears ringing, stomach unsettled, sandals sticking to the ground. As you make your way home, the sound of the Colosseum lingers, the cheers, the cries, the clash of steel. Rome calls it entertainment, you call it Tuesday. And as brutal as it is, you can't deny it. The empire knows how to put on a show. It's equal parts glory and gore, civilization and chaos. And tomorrow, the Colosseum will fill again. More crowds, more fights, more blood on the sand. Because in Rome, even death is just another form of public entertainment, and you, like everyone else, will be back for the sequel. If you thought CrossFit was intense, try being a gladiator. You train in the sun, fight armed maniacs, and hope your boss, the Lannister, doesn't decide you look replaceable. Winning gets you glory. Losing gets you carried out. Your day starts before sunrise, not with yoga or meditation, but with a drill sergeant yelling at you in Latin. You live in the Ludus, a gladiator training school that's part gym, part prison, and part human meat factory. The smell alone tells the story. Sweat, metal, and desperation. You share cramped quarters with dozens of other fighters, some slaves, some prisoners, and a few maniacs who actually volunteered for this life. The only real difference between you and the guys chained up at night is how long management thinks you'll last. Training begins with conditioning. You run laps around the dusty courtyard, dodging stray chickens and occasionally someone's discarded spear. Then come drills, lifting heavy sandbags, swinging wooden swords twice as heavy as real ones, and learning how to dodge without dying. It's all muscle, 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 because in the arena, the weak don't get a second chance. Every scar you earn here is either practice or a preview. The Lannister, your owner, coach, and occasional executioner, watches everything. He's a businessman first and a sadist second, making sure his investments stay profitable. To him, you're not a man, you're a brand. A good gladiator can earn thousands of spectators and thousands of denarii. A bad one earns a shovel. He evaluates your technique, your stamina, even your charisma. If you can make the crowd cheer, you might live another week. If not, well, there's always someone new in line. Weapons training is a science, brutal, sweaty science. Each gladiator specializes in a different style. The Retiarius fights with a net and trident, the Secutor with a sword and shield, the Murmillo with heavy armor and a fish-shaped helmet that makes you look like an angry seafood platter. You're drilled on technique, rhythm, and performance. Because in the Colosseum, fighting isn't just about survival, it's theater. The audience wants drama, not efficiency. A quick kill gets you silence. A drawn-out spectacle gets you applause. Your instructors are veterans, scarred men with missing eyes, fingers, and a casual attitude toward death. They bark commands, demonstrate moves, and occasionally remind you how little your life is worth. Remember, one growls, you fight for Rome's entertainment. The gods might decide your fate, but the crowd decides your paycheck. You nod, pretending to agree, even though your last paycheck was a stale loaf of bread and a compliment. Meals are surprisingly decent, high-carb, high-protein fare known as gladiator gruel. It's barley, beans, and the occasional vegetable. You eat like an athlete because, well, you are one, just without the endorsement deals or dental plans. Nicknamed the Barley Men, gladiators pack on muscle for endurance and shock value, The more imposing you look in the arena, the better the crowd's reaction when you don't die. Afternoons are for sparring mock battles with blunted weapons and full armor under the relentless Roman Sunday. You learn footwork, timing, and how to fall without losing your spleen. Injuries are constant. Blood stains the sand daily. The medicus, doctor, lurks nearby with herbs, bandages, and an expression that says, "Good luck." You've seen enough broken noses and sliced arms to know that medicine in Rome is mostly wishful thinking. Evenings bring a strange calm. After hours of shouting, clanging, and sweat, the ludus quiets down. You and the others sit around, cleaning weapons, trading gossip, and occasionally laughing about near-death experiences, the ancient version of team bonding. Some men talk about earning freedom. Others just stare into the fire, too tired to dream. The unlucky ones polish their armor for tomorrow's match, knowing it might be their last. Every few weeks, the lanista announces a lineup. The chosen men will fight in the next games. The rest will keep training, knowing their turn is coming. The chosen ones walk a little taller, not because they're brave, but because there's a slim chance they'll win. A victory in the arena brings fame, money, and the adoration of thousands. A series of wins could even mean freedom. A wooden sword called the rudis, symbolizing retirement. Of course, most never live to see it. When the night falls, you lie on your straw mat, muscles aching, mind restless. You can hear someone praying quietly to Mars, another whispering to his mother's ghost. The air hums with tension, the quiet before the next storm of violence. You think about your odds, your next opponent, the roar of the crowd. It's not fear that keeps you awake, it's awareness. You've become part of Rome's grand machine, both celebrated and expendable, and when dawn comes, you'll rise again, pick up your sword, and prepare to bleed for applause. Because in the Roman world, glory isn't found in peace, it's earned, one swing at a time. In the gym, you never leave alive. You overhear senators arguing about taxes while pretending to care about the people. Politics in Rome is like reality TV, full of drama, betrayal, and tunics that cost too much. From a distance, Roman politics looks glorious. Marble columns, thunderous speeches, and togas so white they could blind the gods. But up close, it's less noble governance and more expensive shouting. Senators strut around the forum like peacocks, flanked by scribes and sycophants, arguing about public good while privately plotting each other's downfall. Every handshake hides a dagger. Every promise comes with small print. Rome's Senate, in theory, is the heart of the Republic, or what's left of it. In practice, it's a group of rich men yelling at slightly richer men about whose bribes are ruining the country faster. You'd think the world's greatest empire would have a system built on wisdom and integrity. Instead, it's powered by debt, ego, and wine. Lots of wine. The senator takes the floor. He adjusts his toga dramatically, because in Rome, everything's theater, and launches into a speech about the moral decay of society. He gestures passionately, voice booming across the chamber, calling for reform and virtue. The crowd nods, murmurs in approval, and then, 5 minutes later, votes for a new tax that conveniently benefits his cousin's olive oil business. Rome's greatest tradition isn't lawmaking, it's hypocrisy. Most senators come from old families. The patricians, men who trace their ancestry back to the founders of Rome and won't shut up about it. They live in sprawling villas, eat figs off golden plates, and treat public office like a social club with benefits. Elections are less about policies and more about who can throw the best party. Candidates hand out free games, dinners, and coins to the masses, a practice known as ambitus, or, as we'd call it today, campaign strategy. Even the emperor plays the game. He pretends to listen to the Senate's advice, smiling benevolently while knowing full well he can overrule everyone with a wave of his hand. The Senate debates, drafts laws, and gives speeches, but the emperor's word is law. The illusion of democracy keeps the people happy. The reality of autocracy keeps things functional. It's political theater at its finest and bloodiest. Behind the scenes, it's all deals and betrayals. Governors embezzle taxes from distant provinces, generals buy loyalty with loot, and senators trade favors like collectors swapping rare coins. Want a promotion? That'll cost a favor. Want a favor? That'll cost loyalty. Want loyalty? You're in the wrong empire. Rome's motto could easily be, "Everything's for sale, including you." Even the public is in on the performance. Crowds gather outside the Senate House, cheering or booing depending on who's buying the drinks that day. Bread and circuses. As the saying goes, keep the people fed and entertained, and they'll forgive almost anything. The city's pulse beats to the rhythm of corruption and applause. You stroll past a heated argument between two senators. One accuses the other of stealing grain shipments meant for the poor. The other responds by calling his opponent's lineage questionable at best. It's basically a modern-day comment section, just with better grammar and worse sandals. Further down the marble steps, philosophers debate about the meaning of justice while slaves sweep up the trash. Street orators shout manifestos to anyone who'll listen, which is no one. And all around, statues of dead heroes watch silently as their descendants argue about who's more patriotic while pocketing state funds. Even when the Senate is in session, the chaos never really stops. Messengers rush in with news from the province's rebellions, assassinations, unpaid armies, and senators respond with more shouting. Some demand stricter control, others suggest more taxes. A few quietly slip away to consult the gods, which is Roman code for take a nap. Of course, not all politics happens in the open. The real decisions take place at banquets over wine, roasted peacock, and whispered promises. Deals are sealed with toasts, alliances cemented with marriage proposals, and enemies politely poisoned at dessert. Rome's political elite has mastered the art of stabbing people both metaphorically and literally, depending on how negotiations go. As the day winds down, you watch senators file out of the curia, their white togas now creased and wine-stained, their arguments unresolved, but their egos thoroughly exercised. They climb into their litters, carried home by slaves, already plotting tomorrow's schemes. The people disperse, the orators pack up, and the forum returns to its usual noise gossip, vendors, stray dogs, and the faint smell of corruption baking in the Sunday. You can't help but admire it, in a darkly comedic way. Rome has conquered half the world, yet can't pass a law without a shouting match. It's part genius, part madness, and entirely Roman. As you head home, you think about what you've just witnessed. A government that runs on pride, money, and the occasional assassination. It shouldn't work, and yet, somehow, it does. Because in Rome, politics isn't about governing the people, it's about surviving the other politicians. And that, truly, is corruption with extra steps. The market is packed with vendors selling everything from olives to live eels. The air is thick with noise and the smell of produce, sweat, and possibly despair. Haggling is expected. Personal space is not. Welcome to the Macellum, the bustling, beating heart of Roman commerce and chaos. If the forum is where ideas are traded, the market is where everything else gets swapped, shouted over, and occasionally stepped on. It's early morning, but the place is already alive, a kaleidoscope of sound and scent, where the air itself feels sticky with humidity and human activity. You step cautiously into the crowd, and immediately someone shoves a fig in your face, shouting, "Best in Rome, grown by the gods themselves." You're not convinced, but before you can respond, another vendor starts yelling about his discounted olive oil, while a third offers to sell you genuine Egyptian perfume that smells suspiciously like vinegar and regret. The ground beneath you is slick from spilled wine, crushed fruit, and the occasional fish that tried to make a break for freedom. The smell of the fish section hits like a divine punishment, a dense cloud of brine, decay, and ambition. Vendors there display their wares proudly, eels writhing in buckets, octopus tentacles hanging like laundry, and baskets of anchovies so pungent they could end a marriage. A woman beside you pokes at a pile of mussels, sniffs one, and buys it anyway. You silently vow never to eat seafood again. Nearby, the butcher's stall is a symphony of chopping, cleaving, and shouting. Goat carcasses hang from hooks, pigs' heads grin lifelessly, and a man with forearms like tree trunks slams a cleaver through bone as casually as slicing bread. Flies hover optimistically, and apprentices swat at them with cloths that are somehow dirtier than the air. You'd think the Romans would have invented screens by now, but no, just more yelling. Move a few stalls over, and you'll find the produce section a slightly safer, though no less overwhelming, zone. Stacks of figs, grapes, and apples glisten in the sunlight. Pyramids of lentils and beans tower precariously, ready to collapse at the slightest sneeze. Everything looks fresh, but you can't shake the suspicion that half of it's been recycled from yesterday's leftovers. A merchant insists his cabbages can cure headaches and hangovers. You're skeptical, but given the state of Roman medicine, he's probably not wrong by much. Haggling is an art form here, and you're expected to participate. You ask the price of some dates, and the vendor immediately triples its standard practice for anyone with clean sandals and a confused expression. You try to bargain, but before you finish your sentence, he's already sold them to someone else. The Romans invented modern infrastructure, but they also invented being aggressively impatient. There's no such thing as personal space. Every few seconds, someone brushes past you carrying amphorae of wine, baskets of bread, or an entire goose that seems disturbingly alive. Children dart through the crowd, stealing apples and shouting insults that would make a sailor blush. Beggars linger near the exits, hands outstretched, while pickpockets work the edges like ghosts, silent, efficient, and very fond of your coin purse. Somewhere, a street musician plays a shrill tune on a reed flute, competing valiantly with the roaring marketplace. His audience consists mostly of stray dogs and one man too drunk to move. A group of women laugh loudly at a spice seller's exaggerated sales pitch, where he claims his cinnamon comes from the farthest edge of the world, even though it's clearly from a jar labeled Sicily. If you're feeling brave, you can venture into the section selling household goods, pottery, lamps, combs, and dubious miracle remedies. There's oil that supposedly restores youth. Spoiler, it doesn't. Powder that repels evil spirits. Probably just dirt. And charms made from animal bones. The Romans loved their superstitions almost as much as their bargains. Food stalls offer quick snacks for the busy shopper, flatbreads smeared with honey, grilled sausages, or roasted chickpeas served in wax paper. You grab something simple, trying not to think about where the cook washed his hands or if he did at all. The taste is surprisingly good, though you're distracted by the realization that the wine being served with it is roughly 90% water and 10% regret. By midday, the market is at its peak. The heat rises, the air thickens, and tempers flare. Vendors scream to outdo each other. Customers argue like philosophers. And somewhere, a donkey decides it's done with capitalism and refuses to move. The noise is deafening laughter, curses, deals, and the endless rhythm of Roman life. When you finally emerge from the crowd, clutching your purchases and what's left of your dignity, the sunlight feels oddly quiet. You take a deep breath, and it hits you fish. Somehow, impossibly, you still smell like fish. You glance back at the chaos behind you, the shouting, the smells, the color, the life. It's filthy, it's loud, it's exhausting, but it's Rome. The empire doesn't just conquer lands, it conquers your senses. And in the marketplace, amid the olives and eels, you realize that for all its glory and grandeur, Rome's greatest achievement might just be surviving its own smell. After hours in the sun, you stumble home and collapse for a nap, a Roman meridiertio. Everyone does it. The only time Rome goes quiet is when everyone's too heat-stunned to keep shouting. The afternoon in Rome is no joke. By midday, the sun isn't shining, it's attacking. The marble streets that looked so noble this morning now shimmer with heat like an oven floor, and the air itself feels thick enough to chew. The city slows to a crawl, every sound muffled by exhaustion. The once booming marketplace falls into an uneasy silence, broken only by the buzz of flies, and the occasional donkey sighing like it too regrets being alive. You drag yourself through the streets, sandals sticking slightly to the stone, each step echoing the same thought. Sleep or die. You're not alone. Workers close their shops, shutters bang shut, and the streets empty faster than free wine at a festival. Even the loudest fishmonger from this morning has vanished, replaced by a peaceful hum, the collective snoring of a million sunburned Romans. Back home, your insular apartment feels like the inside of a clay pot left too close to a forge. You peel off your sweat-drenched tunic, pour what might generously be called water over your head, and collapse onto your straw mattress. Luxury, Roman style. The room smells faintly of dust, olive oil, and that one rat who refuses to pay rent. The meridiertio isn't laziness, it's survival strategy. Romans learned quickly that working through the hottest hours of the day was a fast track to dehydration, madness, or both. So from about the 6th hour, roughly noon, until the 9th hour, the empire collectively powers down. Bureaucrats stop pretending to work, builders stop pretending not to cry, and even the most ambitious merchants admit defeat. The city, for once, rests. Outside, the world softens. Sunlight filters through window slats, painting golden bars across your floor. Somewhere, a pigeon coos lazily. You can hear your upstairs neighbor snoring through the thin walls. It sounds like a saw cutting through a loaf of bread. Someone downstairs mutters in their sleep, probably dreaming about cooler climates or fresher fish. For a brief moment, Rome feels almost peaceful. You close your eyes, and time slows. Your body finally unclenches, your mind drifts, and you slip into that half-conscious Roman dream state where everything smells vaguely of figs and politics. Historians often romanticize Roman afternoons as serene, poetic interludes. The truth is less elegant. It's a collective coma born out of necessity. But not everyone naps. Somewhere across town, slaves continue their work, fanning their masters or running errands in the blinding heat. In the military camps, soldiers stand guard under the scorching sun, sweating through their armor and muttering curses that could melt bronze. Rome's hierarchy doesn't sleep equally, but even emperors understood the power of the meridiatio. Julius Caesar himself was known to nap midday, though probably on something softer than straw and with fewer fleas. The nap itself is short, maybe half an hour, maybe 2, but it's transformative. You wake up groggy, covered in a thin layer of sweat and dust, but somehow reborn. Your head pounds slightly, your mouth feels like sandpaper, and yet you're alive. The sounds of the city begin to creep back in. Footsteps, laughter, the clatter of carts. The world stirs again. Children's voices echo from the street. Merchants reopen their shutters, and the hum of civilization resumes. Someone starts shouting about bread prices, another curses at a mule, and the city exhales as if it's been holding its breath. The sun, still brutal, but a little less murderous, slants lower over the rooftops. Life returns in waves. You stretch, crack your neck, and drink a cup of watered wine to trick your body into thinking it's hydrated. Outside, people are already sweeping stoops and rekindling ovens. The meridiatio has done its job. Rome's collective temper has been reset. For a few brief hours, no one will throw anything at anyone. As you step into the street, blinking against the fading glare, you can feel the rhythm of the city shifting again, the afternoon lull, giving way to the restless energy of evening. You survived the heat, you survived the nap, and you survived another Roman day that felt like a slow-cooked punishment. The meridiatio may not be glamorous, but it's the empire's greatest unspoken law: stop before you melt. And as the city wakes, stretching its marble limbs and shaking off its drowsiness, you realize that even Rome, with all its power and pride, must sometimes surrender to the Sunday. Because in this city of gods and ambition, the true secret to survival isn't conquest. It's a really good nap. Feeling sick? The doctor will bleed you, recommend pigeon dung, or chant something in Greek. Somehow, this counts as healthcare. Miraculously, people survive anyway, probably just despite the doctors. Medicine in ancient Rome walks a fine line between science and sorcery, and often falls squarely into trial and terrifying error. For a civilization that could engineer aqueducts, highways, and massive stadiums, their approach to health was bold. The average Roman's first line of medical defense wasn't a physician but superstition. Get a fever? Clearly the gods are mad at you. Toothache? Probably a curse. Stub your toe? The universe itself might be plotting against you. If you actually visit a medicus, the Roman doctor, you'll quickly realize that you'd rather not. The clinic is small, dark, and smells like a combination of vinegar, old blood, and regret. There's no sterilization, no anesthesia, and very few tools that look remotely comforting. Metal hooks, scalpels, and saws are laid out neatly, gleaming in the sunlight like props from a horror play. The medicus greets you with the calm confidence of a man who has no idea what he's doing but knows he'll be paid anyway. You describe your symptoms. Fever, headache, nausea. He nods sagely, pretends to think, then announces that your humors are imbalanced. According to Roman, and Greek. Medical theory, the body is ruled by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Feeling unwell means one of them is winning. The solution? Bleeding. Always bleeding. The medicus pulls out a small knife, mutters something about balance and harmony, and nicks your arm. Blood drips into a bowl, and you're assured this will restore your vitality. You start to feel lightheaded, which the doctor interprets as the treatment is working. He might even apply a heated cup to your skin for good measure, sucking more blood to the surface. You're not sure if you're cured, but you're definitely paler. If that doesn't work, you can always try cupping, purging, or vomiting. Roman doctors believed that forcing the body to violently expel its contents was the fastest way to health. A particularly unlucky patient might be prescribed a laxative made from boiled cabbage and vinegar, or worse, something involving animal dung. Pigeon droppings were popular. Apparently the Romans thought birds had some mysterious healing properties. You, on the other hand, are starting to suspect the real miracle is anyone surviving into adulthood. And it's not just the ingredients that are questionable, it's the methods. Some doctors believe in astrology, others in magic. They'll recite Greek spells, burn herbs, and tie amulets around your neck to ward off evil vapors. One might rub goose fat on your chest while another insists you drink powdered pearls. There's no consistency, just vibes. You begin to wonder if the doctor's main qualification is confidence. Of course, not all Roman medicine is nonsense. Some doctors, like Galen, the empire's most famous physician, actually observe anatomy, record symptoms, and experiment with treatments. Unfortunately, Galen's experiments mostly involve dissecting animals, since cutting open humans is frowned upon. As a result, Roman medical knowledge of the human body is both impressive and wildly inaccurate. Galen once claimed the liver had 5 lobes. It doesn't. He also said blood moves back and forth in the veins like tides. It doesn't do that either, but he said it with conviction. And in Rome, that's what counts. Surgery is another story. If you're unlucky enough to need an operation, may the gods help you, because the doctor won't. There's no anesthesia, no antiseptic, and no guarantee you'll wake up. You're strapped to a table, held down by assistants, and told to be brave. The surgeon goes to work, slicing open wounds with tools that look like gardening equipment. The smell of iron and sweat fills the room. If you live through it, congratulations, you've just achieved medical greatness. Some treatments are genuinely innovative, though. Roman physicians used opium and wine as painkillers, honey as an antiseptic, and even developed surgical instruments that resemble modern scalpels and forceps. They cleaned wounds with vinegar and stitched them using linen thread. Not bad, considering the alternative was praying to Asclepius, the god of medicine, and hoping he was in a good mood that day. If you can't afford a doctor, you might turn to the herbalists and wise women who line the streets. Their remedies involve plants, powders, and prayers, often with instructions like, drink this while facing east under a full moon. Their potions probably won't cure your plague, but at least they won't stab you. Some actually work willow bark for pain, garlic for infections, though no one really knows why. By evening, your treatment's done. You've been bled, purged, and blessed, and the doctor tells you to rest. If you survive, he'll take full credit. If you die, well, clearly your humours were too far gone. You stagger home, wrapped in bandages and confusion, praying you never catch a cold again. And yet, somehow, the Romans keep surviving through plagues, infections, and questionable health care. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's stubbornness, or maybe the gods just have a soft spot for people who can endure a medical system built on equal parts bravery and nonsense. So next time you take a painkiller or use a bandage, give a quiet thanks to the Romans, the pioneers of bleeding for fun and profit. Because without them, medicine might still be one long guessing game, starring a man with a knife and too much confidence. Cats, dogs, monkeys, the Romans loved pets almost as much as they ignored sanitation. The streets are full of strays, and every apartment seems to have at least one parrot that won't shut up. Despite their reputation for military discipline and marble-faced seriousness, Romans had a surprisingly soft spot for animals, or at least for animals that didn't bite senators or steal food. Pets were status symbols, companions, and sometimes miniature chaos machines. Walk down any Roman street, and you'll find a living zoo. Dogs barking, cats lounging on rooftops, monkeys stealing bread, and birds squawking like gossipy old men. Let's start with the dogs, the undisputed kings of Roman households. From sleek hunting hounds to shaggy street mutts, dogs were everywhere. Wealthy families kept elegant breeds like the Molossus, a massive mastiff-like creature used for hunting and guarding villas. The poor, on the other hand, made do with smaller, scrappier dogs that doubled as burglar alarms and rat deterrents. A typical Roman front door might even bear a mosaic warning visitors. Cave canem, beware of the dog. Of course, that warning was less about safety and more about bragging rights. The Romans loved showing off their pets like modern influencers flaunt designer handbags. Cats, while less adored than dogs, still had their fans. Imported from Egypt, cats slinked through Roman homes and temples, keeping the rodent population under control. They weren't worshipped like they were in Egypt, but Romans respected their independence mostly because cats seemed to ignore everyone equally. In a city that thrived on attention and ego, that kind of attitude was practically divine. It's easy to imagine some Roman poet watching his cat nap through his latest masterpiece and declaring it a metaphor for society's indifference. Then there were the monkeys, the true agents of chaos. Exotic and expensive, monkeys were popular among the wealthy as novelty pets. They wore little collars, learned tricks, and occasionally ruined dinner parties by stealing jewelry or throwing fruit at guests. They were adored for their wit and despised for their mischief, which made them perfect Roman citizens in miniature. Some were even trained as entertainers, dancing in the streets for coins or performing in small household shows. A monkey was both a pet and a party trick until it inevitably bit someone, at which point it was quietly gifted to a neighbor. Birds were another Roman obsession. Parrots, ravens, and songbirds filled homes with noise and personality. The elite prized African grey parrots for their ability to mimic speech, though what most of them learned to repeat were probably curse words and tax complaints. A famous Roman writer once complained that parrots speak only to demand food, which makes them eerily relatable. Doves, too, were popular symbols of love, peace, and occasionally dinner. The wealthy kept aviaries filled with colourful finches and nightingales, while the less affluent were content with a pigeon or two that doubled as both messenger and meal, depending on the day. Of course, not every Roman's relationship with animals was gentle. Many pets doubled as workers or performers. Dogs herded livestock, guard dogs patrolled estates, and pigeons carried messages across cities. Animals were everywhere in the streets, in temples, even in baths, though not always intentionally. Exotic animals like leopards, lions, and bears were also imported for the arena, where they met less affectionate fates. Still, the everyday Roman's bond with pets was sincere, if slightly chaotic. The streets of Rome were practically an open-air kennel. Stray dogs fought over scraps near taverns, cats prowled the alleys, and donkeys trudged through the noise with eternal resignation. The city's sanitation, or lack thereof, meant animals lived shoulder to shoulder with people, and fleas lived shoulder to shoulder with everyone. It wasn't unusual to wake up to a dog barking outside, a cat stealing your breakfast, and a neighbor's parrot yelling something that sounded suspiciously insulting. Romans even commemorated their pets in death. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny tombstones and epitaphs dedicated to beloved animals. One gravestone reads, "To Helena, my dear little dog, who never barked without reason." Another mourns a bird that sang so sweetly, even the gods wept. The fact that someone paid for a marble inscription for their parrot says a lot about Roman priorities, and probably their loneliness. Pet ownership also cut across class lines. The wealthy flaunted theirs as accessories, the poor loved theirs like family. A baker's dog might guard his stall, while a fisherman's cat kept rats away from his salted catch. Even soldiers marching to the edges of the empire often brought pets along: small dogs, birds, even ferrets, reminders of home in foreign lands. It's a surprisingly human touch in a world that often seems defined by conquest and cruelty. As the sun sets, you can hear the city's animal orchestra tuning up again, barking, meowing, chirping, braying. Somewhere, a monkey shrieks as someone yells, "Get back here with my ring!" and a parrot laughs in the distance. You smile despite yourself. Rome may have conquered the world, but within its walls, the animals conquered the Romans. So, as you lay down for the night, serenaded by stray dogs and a parrot repeating the word idiot on loop, you realize life in ancient Rome wasn't all glory and marble. Sometimes it was just you, a half-tame cat, and a very loud bird. Civilization, it turns out, has always come with fur, feathers, and just a little bit of chaos. Evening arrives, and you're invited to a convivium. Everyone eats lying down, talking politics with their mouths full, and trying not to choke on grapes. The wine flows freely, the dignity does not. A Roman dinner party is not a meal, it's an event. A full-scale social performance held in 3 acts. Eating, drinking, and regretting everything you said after the drinking. If you're lucky enough to get invited, congratulations. You're about to witness Rome at its most unhinged, a perfect blend of luxury, gluttony, and light treason disguised as small talk. You arrive at the host's villa just before sunset. The entrance smells of incense, olive oil, and ambition. Slaves greet you at the door, ushering you inside to the triclinium, the dining room. It's lavishly decorated with marble floors, painted frescoes of gods who look suspiciously like your host, and enough gold leaf to bankrupt a small province. 3 couches are arranged in a U shape around a low table, and yes, everyone eats lying down. Reclining while eating is the Roman equivalent of saying, "I've made it." You're shown to your place not seated, but sprawled awkwardly on your left side, propped on one elbow. The lower your position on the couch, the lower your social status. The best spots go to senators and poets, the worst to whoever brought the cheapest wine. You try to look comfortable, but the pose is designed for people who've spent their whole lives practicing how to look relaxed and superior at the same time. Within 5 minutes, your arms are asleep, your tunic's wrinkled, and you've accidentally kicked your neighbor. Welcome to dinner. The slaves bring in the gustachio, or appetizer course. Dishes appear one after another. Olives, boiled eggs, stuffed dormice, yes, actual mice, and honeyed wine. You nibble cautiously, pretending not to notice that your host's dog is staring at you like it knows something you don't. Across the room, a guest loudly praises the flavor of the snails while another mutters about the state of the republic. The conversation has already shifted from food to politics, the fastest way to ruin any party, ancient or modern. By the time the main course arrives, the room smells like roasted meat, perfume, and mild tension. Platters of peacock, wild boar, and fish are paraded in like celebrities, each more over the top than the last. One dish is a pig stuffed with sausages, which is stuffed with smaller birds, which are stuffed with, you guessed it, more sausages. It's culinary inception. The Romans called this extravagance. You call it a cry for help. Wine, of course, flows endlessly. Roman wine is strong, so strong it's always watered down, though by the 3rd cup no one bothers. Slaves move constantly, refilling cups and dabbing spills with linen cloths. The laughter grows louder, the conversation looser, and soon everyone's loudly agreeing with whoever's talking, regardless of the topic. Someone makes a joke about the emperor. Everyone laughs too hard. Then they all look around to see who else heard it. Between courses, entertainment arrives. Musicians, dancers, poets, maybe even an acrobat. One particularly daring performer recites verses comparing his patron to Jupiter. It's flattering, if a bit desperate. Meanwhile, a philosopher in the corner drunkenly debates whether true virtue can exist in a world where olives cost more than bread. You sip your wine and pretend to care, mostly because he's twice your size and blocking the exit. Dessert or secunda mensa is a final test of endurance. Honey cakes, dates, figs, and candied nuts appear, followed by more wine. Someone proposes a toast to friendship and fortune. Someone else toasts to the downfall of our enemies. A third person accidentally toasts to that woman's parrot, and somehow it becomes the night's most popular toast. The night devolves predictably. Guests start singing, a senator challenges a poet to a drinking contest, and 2 men begin wrestling over a bowl of pomegranates. One guest passes out mid-lecture on Roman virtue. Another declares he's writing a play about this dinner. You're fairly sure he's serious. Your host smiles through it all, basking in the chaos, because this, to him, is success. The louder the laughter, the higher his social standing. Eventually, The dinner winds down. Guests stagger out under the stars, their sandals scraping the cobblestones, their stomachs heavy with meat and bad decisions. The streets echo with hiccups, laughter, and the sound of someone promising, "Next time it'll be quieter." It never is. Back inside, the slaves clean up the battlefield, half-eaten food, overturned cups, and the lingering smell of roasted ambition. Your head spins as you walk home, trying to remember which part of the night was real and which part was performance. And that's the Roman convivium. Not a quiet meal, but a spectacle. A place where reputation is built one grape at a time, and where too much food, wine, and ego collide spectacularly under the banner of friendship. You collapse into bed with a stomach full of regrets and a brain full of gossip, whispering the ancient Roman bedtime prayer, "Please, gods, don't let me say anything stupid at the next one." Every luxury in Rome runs on forced labor. From building temples to scrubbing bath floors, slaves keep the city alive. It's brutal, endless, and the reason Roman comfort exists at all. For all its marble, poetry, and philosophy, the Roman Empire rests on an ugly truth. It's powered by people who don't get paid. Slavery isn't just part of the system, it is the system. Every stone, every feast, every shining piece of silver on a senator's table comes from someone else's sweat and suffering. Rome may brag about its greatness, but behind the rhetoric of glory stands an exhausted workforce, wondering what, exactly, is so glorious about it. Slaves are everywhere. They sweep the streets, build the aqueducts, carry messages, manage households, and tutor the children of the elite. There are slaves who cook, slaves who fight, slaves who dig, and slaves who die so that free citizens can complain about the weather. You can't go 10 steps in Rome without seeing one unless, of course, you're one yourself, in which case you're too busy trying not to make eye contact with anyone above you. The Romans got their slaves from everywhere. Conquered provinces, debtors, the unlucky, and sometimes even people kidnapped by pirates. War was Rome's favorite recruitment method. Each victorious campaign brought back thousands of captives, men, women, and children, marched in chains through triumphal parades before being sold at auction. It's hard to admire the empire's conquests when you realize every victory came with a human receipt. Life as a slave depends entirely on your luck and your owner's mood. Household slaves, especially those owned by the wealthy, might have decent food, clean clothes, and the illusion of stability. Some even run entire estates or businesses, trusted with money and management but never with freedom. Others aren't so lucky. Field slaves, mine workers, and those in construction face lives of exhaustion and danger. Mining slaves, in particular, have it worse, trapped in darkness, breathing dust, and working until their bodies give out. Rome's gold shines because someone else's life didn't. Inside the grand villas, slavery looks deceptively civilized. You might serve dinner, pour wine, or fan your master while pretending not to hear his latest drunken rant about philosophy. You're invisible until something goes wrong: spill a drink, break a plate, or speak out of turn, and the punishment is swift. Beatings are common, humiliation even more so. For all their talk of virtue, Romans treat their slaves as property with emotions only when it's convenient. The most educated slaves become tutors or secretaries, writing letters and managing correspondence for their masters. Some even become trusted confidants until they stop being useful. The Romans had a saying, "A slave has no friends." It wasn't just cruel, it was practical advice. Loyalty could be bought, but freedom almost never was. Still, a few managed to earn their manumission release from bondage. A freed slave becomes a libertus, a citizen of sorts, though always marked by their past. Many stay in service to their former masters, partly out of gratitude, partly out of necessity. Freedom in Rome is never free. It just comes with better clothes and more taxes. Even entertainment depends on slavery. The gladiators who fight in the Colosseum? Slaves. The musicians at dinner parties? Slaves. The actors on stage? Slaves. Romans love to call themselves a civilization of culture and intellect, but their entire leisure industry runs on human misery. When you cheer for a gladiator's victory, you're watching someone who can't go home afterward because home is a cage beneath the arena. Occasionally, slaves rebel. The most famous revolt, led by Spartacus, shook Rome to its core. For 2 years, thousands of escaped slaves fought back, defeating Roman legions and proving that the oppressed could strike fear into their masters. Rome's response was brutal crucifixions lining the Appian Way for miles. The message was clear: challenge the empire, and the empire will make an example out of you. Even the philosophers couldn't quite agree on what to do with slavery. Some, like Seneca, wrote long essays about treating slaves kindly, as if politeness could fix a system built on ownership. Others justified it as natural, claiming that some people were born to rule and others to serve. It's astonishing how quickly moral philosophy collapses when money is involved, but for all its cruelty, slavery is what keeps Rome running. Without slaves, the empire collapses. The baths go cold, the temples crumble, the harvest rots. Free citizens spend their days in politics and leisure because someone else is doing the actual work. It's not just exploitation, it's infrastructure. Rome doesn't just use slaves, it depends on them. As night falls, the city glows with lamplight carried, of course, by slaves. The marble halls gleam, the fountains trickle, and laughter drifts from the homes of the powerful. Somewhere in the shadows, a slave quietly cleans up the mess, knowing tomorrow will be exactly the same. And that's Rome's great contradiction. A civilization that conquered the world, but couldn't exist without chaining its own people. The empire's strength is built on the backs of those who will never see its glory. Its progress through punishment, luxury built from suffering. So while senators boast about honor and gods, the truth is simpler and far uglier. The real gods of Rome aren't Jupiter or Mars. They're sweat, silence, and survival. And they're worshipped every single day by those who keep the empire alive. When the sun sets, the city gets wilder. Drunks stumble through alleys, thieves lurk in shadows, and street lamps don't exist. If you're smart, you stay indoors. If not, you wake up without your sandals. Rome by day is loud, crowded, and chaotic, but by night it becomes something else entirely. A mix between a street party and a crime documentary. The empire's greatest city doesn't sleep, it just changes tone. The marble gleam fades, the air cools, and the shadows get teeth. The first thing you notice is the darkness. Without streetlights, the city turns pitch black the moment the sun disappears. Torches flicker along main roads, carried by servants or mounted outside taverns, but most side streets vanish into inky blackness. Every alley feels like it's hiding something or someone. The uneven cobblestones make every step an act of faith. One loose stone, one puddle of mystery liquid, and you're down faster than a gladiator with stage fright. But not everyone hides. For the bold or the bored night in Rome is when the fun begins. Taverns and small wine shops fill with laughter, music, and very questionable life choices. The smell of spiced wine, sweat, and roasted meat lingers in the air. Drunken arguments break out over politics, love, or who has the better beard. Someone's singing loudly off-key. Someone else is trying to dance without spilling their drink. It's like an ancient version of a Friday night bar crawl, only with more togas and fewer health codes. The wine flows freely, and Romans don't believe in moderation. It's strong, unfiltered, and usually mixed with honey, herbs, or seawater. Yes, seawater apparently, that counts as flavor. The poor drink cheap, sour stuff out of clay cups. The rich sip vintage Falernian from silver goblets while pretending they can taste undertones of fig. But no matter your class, the result's the same: bad decisions by the amphora. Taverns also double as social hubs and occasionally crime scenes. You'll find gamblers shouting over dice games, lovers whispering in corners, and pickpockets hovering nearby like vultures. Prostitutes mingle with sailors, soldiers, and merchants, their laughter echoing down the street. The atmosphere is rowdy, intoxicating, and just slightly dangerous. You can't help but feel alive, mostly because you're trying very hard not to get robbed. Outside the taverns, the city hums with quieter, darker energy. Thieves stalk the shadows, cutting purses and vanishing into side alleys before anyone can shout. The vigiles, Rome's night watchmen, patrol with torches and clubs, but their presence is more symbolic than effective. Half of them are ex-slaves, underpaid and overworked. The other half are probably taking bribes. If you're mugged, their best advice is to pray to Mercury, the god of thieves. If you're unlucky enough to wander into the Subura, Rome's infamous slum district, congratulations, you've entered the ancient world's version of a crime documentary. The air smells like smoke, the buildings lean dangerously close, and every door hides a story you probably don't want to hear. Fights break out over coins, women, or pride. You pass a man asleep in a doorway, another singing to himself, and a third offering authentic Greek pottery that definitely isn't Greek and probably isn't pottery. Yet, somehow, it's not all chaos. There's a strange beauty to Rome at night. The moon glints off marble statues, the Tiber shimmers quietly under the bridges, and distant laughter floats through the air. Lovers sneak along the riverbanks, whispering under cloaks. Musicians play soft tunes on lutes, their melodies echoing down empty streets. Even the chaos has rhythm, like the city itself knows how to breathe between disasters. If you're wealthy, your nighttime experience is entirely different. You might attend a private banquet, the kind where the wine flows faster than gossip. These dinner parties stretch late into the night, filled with music, poetry, and carefully veiled insults. Someone inevitably recites bad verse about Caesar, someone else laughs too loudly, and by dawn, at least one senator is asleep under a table. You leave with a headache, wine stains, and the creeping suspicion that you've just witnessed several future political scandals in real time. Meanwhile, the temples glow faintly with candlelight as priests perform late-night rituals. Incense smoke curls into the darkness, mingling with the city's smells of wine, bread, and burning oil. Rome may look asleep, but its gods are always awake, watching, judging, and possibly laughing. As the night wears on, the tavern's quiet. The laughter fades, the music stops, and even the thieves retire. The vigiles make their final rounds, kicking awake drunks and shooing them toward home. Somewhere, a rooster crows too early, and you realize it's nearly dawn. You stumble back through the winding streets, shoes dusty, head spinning, pockets suspiciously lighter. The torches have burned low, casting long, twitching shadows against the walls. The city feels half asleep, half alive, like it's holding its breath for the morning. By the time you reach your insula, the first light of dawn stretches across the rooftops. You collapse onto your straw mattress, heart still pounding from the mix of wine and adrenaline. Somewhere outside, a cart rattles past, and you wonder if the night was a dream or a warning. Because in ancient Rome, the darkness wasn't just a time of rest, it was a mirror. It showed you everything the empire tried to hide. The hunger, the joy, the danger, and the desperate, beautiful chaos of being alive. And if you wake up missing your sandals, well, at least you survived the night. You crawl into bed, a straw-filled sack that crunches ominously. Outside, dogs bark, drunks sing, and someone argues about taxes. You close your eyes, praying the building doesn't catch fire before dawn. Night in ancient Rome is never truly quiet. Even when the streets finally go still, the city keeps breathing, a restless, creaking, whispering sort of life that seeps through the walls. You lie there, exhausted, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of olive oil and despair, and wonder if this is what luxury feels like. Spoiler, it isn't. Your mattress, generously described as such, is a sack stuffed with straw, reeds, or occasionally hay if you're feeling fancy. Each movement makes it rustle like an irritated snake, and the more you try to get comfortable, the more it seems to retaliate. You shift, you sigh, you adjust, and somehow you end up poked by a piece of stalk with malicious intent. Pillows are a rare privilege. If you're lucky, you've stuffed an old tunic with rags and called it good enough. The ancient Roman version of memory foam is just trying to remember when you last washed your sheets. The air is heavy, thick, with the smell of cooking smoke, stale wine, and the faint tang of sewage from the nearby street drain. Rome's sanitation system might be revolutionary, but it's also right outside your window. If you live in an insula, a Roman apartment block, your bedroom is less of a room and more of a cramped, multi-purpose cell. You eat there, sleep there, occasionally panic there when the walls creak louder than usual. The danger is real. Roman insulae were notorious for collapsing or catching fire. Made mostly of wood and wishful thinking, these multi-story buildings were packed so tightly together that one spark from an oil lamp could turn a whole block into a bonfire. You lie awake some nights, listening to your upstairs neighbor stomp around and think, if this building goes, so do I. It's not exactly a soothing bedtime thought. Mosquitoes add their own special flair to Roman insomnia. They swarm near the open window, drawn by the lamplight and your general sense of vulnerability. You can try to shoo them away, but they always return, buzzing in your ear like judgmental spirits. There's no mosquito net, no repellent, just you, a bit of smoke from the oil lamp, and the faint hope they'll find someone tastier. Spoiler, they won't. And then there's the noise. Rome is never silent. From the alleyway below comes the sound of a dog barking at something invisible, followed by a drunk shouting a song that's at least 3 verses too long. A baby starts crying next door, then someone yells, "Quiet," which, ironically, makes things louder. Somewhere in the distance, a cart rumbles over cobblestones, echoing through the night like thunder. The walls are thin enough to hear your neighbors arguing about rent, cooking, or who ate the last fig. Privacy, like plumbing, is for the rich. Speaking of the rich, if you were lucky enough to be part of Rome's elite, bedtime looks very different. Your villa bedroom would feature silk sheets, carved wooden furniture, and a soft feather mattress imported from the provinces. Slaves would light scented oil lamps, adjust your pillows, and fan you until you drifted off. You'd fall asleep to the sound of fountains instead of street fights. Of course, the irony is that even rich Romans didn't necessarily sleep better, they just complained in more comfort. For most people, though, bedtime is practical. You undress, fold your tunic neatly, because replacements are expensive, and crawl under a blanket woven from wool that's both itchy and heavy enough to double as body armor. The temperature never seems right. Too hot in summer, too cold in winter. In the colder months, you huddle close to a small brazier for warmth, hoping not to suffocate from the fumes. Fire safety wasn't a strong suit in ancient design. Dreams come easily, mostly because exhaustion leaves you no choice. You drift in and out, half aware of the sounds outside, half lost in thoughts of tomorrow's chaos. The Romans didn't have alarm clocks, but between roosters, shouting vendors, and collapsing ceilings, there's really no need for one. Every night feels borrowed, every sleep temporary, a brief pause before the city demands your attention again. If you do manage to sleep deeply, the dreams themselves might be bizarre. Romans believed dreams were messages from the gods, filled with omens and symbols. You might dream of flying good luck. You might dream of snakes bad luck. You might dream of your neighbor's parrot yelling your name extremely bad luck, because it probably means you'll wake up to it doing exactly that. As dawn begins to creep through the shutters, you wake groggy, covered in straw, sweat, and existential dread. Your back aches, your head throbs, and your mouth feels like you've been chewing dust. The first sound you hear is the city coming back to life, footsteps, arguments, market cries. The night has passed without fire or collapse, which counts as a solid win by Roman standards. You stretch, mutter a quick thanks to the household gods for keeping you alive, and prepare to face another day of chaos, noise, and questionable hygiene. Rome doesn't rest, it merely pauses between disasters. And as you head out into the morning light, you can't help but think. Sleep in ancient Rome isn't so much restorative as it is survival. Every night is a gamble between fatigue, fleas, and falling masonry, and if you wake up breathing, well, that's about as close to luxury as it gets. You survive the night. Barely. Your head throbs from cheap wine, your back aches from stone floors, and your neighbor's rooster is already screaming, "Welcome to another day in the empire." The civilization that invented plumbing but never figured out quiet. The morning in ancient Rome doesn't so much begin as it ambushes you. There's no gentle sunrise or soothing alarm tone, just chaos. Someone's already hammering outside. A street vendor is yelling about bread, and your upstairs neighbor is dragging amphorae around like he's moving furniture for sport. You blink against the sunlight streaming through a crooked wooden shutter, and wonder what sins you committed in a past life to deserve this particular headache. Your mouth tastes like a mixture of vinegar and regret, the signature flavor of Roman wine. You vaguely remember last night's convivium, dinner party. Too much drinking, too much boasting, and someone reciting poetry so bad it should have been a crime. Romans didn't sip wine to unwind, they treated it like a sport. And this morning, your head is the stadium. You sit up, immediately regretting it. Your back protests, your joints pop like broken pottery, and your spine sends a formal complaint to the gods. The straw mattress you collapsed onto last night now looks like it lost the will to live. You're coated in a fine layer of dust, your tunic smells suspiciously of smoke, and you can't remember if that's your sandal by the door or your neighbor's. Either way, you're too tired to care. Roman hangovers are not for the faint of heart. There's no coffee, no aspirin, no greasy breakfast to soak up the shame. The ancient cure for overindulgence? Either eat a raw owl's egg, if you can afford one, or rub your temples with fried cabbage. Some swear by drinking vinegar mixed with crushed herbs, which sounds less like medicine and more like a punishment. You decide to stick with cold water and a quiet vow to never drink again, a vow that will absolutely not survive past noon. You stumble to the wash basin, splash some water on your face, and realize it's freezing. The Romans didn't do hot morning showers, unless, of course, you were rich enough to own a hypercaust, the ancient central heating system. These marvels of engineering channeled heat under floors and through walls, warming villas like ancient radiators. Unfortunately, you live in an insula, which means your version of a hypercaust is standing near the neighbor's cooking fire and hoping some of the warmth leaks through the wall. The smell of baking bread drifts through the window, mingling with less delightful scents, open sewers, fish from the market, and humanity in general. Rome is awake, and it's loud about it. Somewhere nearby, a baker curses as he burns his hand, a donkey brays indignantly, and two men are already arguing about politics in the street. You pull on your tunic, which is somehow both wrinkled and damp, and decide that surviving this morning qualifies as a victory. You consider breakfast, if it can be called that. Romans aren't big on morning meals. Maybe a hunk of yesterday's bread, dipped in watered wine if you're still feeling reckless. The truly decadent might have some cheese or olives, but most people just grab whatever's left and get on with it. You chew mechanically, trying not to think about how every bite tastes faintly of storage room. If you were an elite Roman, your morning would look far more comfortable. You'd wake in a warm villa, with servants drawing baths and preparing honeyed water to soothe your head. A physician might drop by to check your pulse and prescribe something that involves leeches. You'd lounge on silk sheets, listening to musicians play softly while your hypercaust hums beneath you. But you? You're just trying to keep your tunic from falling apart and your dignity from doing the same. Outside, the streets begin to buzz with life. Merchants open their stalls, slaves rush errands, and orators rehearse speeches they'll shout in the forum later. The city feels both eternal and exhausted, like it's been doing this for centuries, which, to be fair, it has. You step into the sunlight, squinting at the glare bouncing off the marble buildings. It's beautiful and unbearable all at once. As you make your way toward the baths, because if anything can fix this hangover, it's hot water and denial, you pass others in the same sorry state. A man slumped against a fountain groans something about too much Falernian, while another vomits gracefully into a gutter. You nod in solidarity. The empire may be vast, but misery is universal. At the thermae, you sink into the warm water, feeling the steam rise around you. The headache fades, the aches ease, and you almost start to feel human again. Around you, men gossip, argue, and pretend not to notice that half the bathwater smells faintly of last night's wine. You close your eyes, letting the warmth seep into your bones, and think, maybe Rome isn't so bad after all. By the time you emerge, the sun is high, the city's fully awake, and your hangover has evolved into a mild sense of optimism. You survived another Roman morning which, given the plumbing, the noise, and the constant risk of spontaneous fire, is nothing short of a miracle. As you walk home, sandals scuffing against the stones, you can't help but smirk. Rome might be loud, dirty, and hungover, but it's alive. And somehow, against all odds, so are you. So tonight, as you sink a little deeper into your soft, suspiciously comfortable mattress, take a slow breath in through the nose, out through the relief that you weren't born Roman. Because for all their marble statues, aqueducts, and fancy Latin slogans, the average Roman day was a lot. You woke to noise, heat, and neighbors shouting about fish. You ate food that smelled like a dare, scraped your body with a metal spoon, and risked tetanus every time you used the bathroom. And if that wasn't enough, you had to survive collapsing apartments, corrupt senators, and the daily gamble of Will this bread kill me or just mildly inconvenience me? Yet somehow, they kept going. They built roads that still exist, poems that still matter, and cities that still stand even if they were occasionally covered in volcanic ash. The Romans were loud, stubborn, and spectacularly unbothered by filth. They lived, laughed, fought, and complained a lot like us, really just with more togas and fewer safety regulations. So maybe, as you drift off tonight, whisper a quiet thank you to those ancient insomniacs who paved the way for plumbing, politics, and pizza. They suffered through the heat, the smells, and the public toilets, so we could have scented candles, washing machines, and private bathrooms with doors. Because history, for all its grime and chaos, reminds us that humans have always been ridiculous, endlessly inventive, endlessly hopeful, endlessly trying to get comfortable in a world that rarely is. Now close your eyes. The city's noise fades to a murmur, the clatter of sandals, the hum of voices, the gentle crackle of a dying fire. You're safe, clean, and blessedly unsmeared in olive oil. Sleep well, traveler. You've survived Rome, and that's more than most ever did.